Welcome to the Education Committee on Thursday the 14th of February. Claire, do we have any sudden apologies?
Chairman, Mr Birrell and Ms Dennis aren't present, and Councillor Stitt is here. An apology? Yep. There are 21 members present.
Thank you. Members, do we have any declarations of interest? Moving on to item 3, the minutes of the meeting of... Oh, sorry, Councillor McKee.
Sorry to interrupt you, Chair, but this is the Education Committee, isn't it? See the last 2 pages of these papers? We never got magnifying glasses with the papers, unfortunately.
Councillor McKee, we've already flagged this up as an issue for many of us that even I couldn't read them. Well, the director, I'll bring him in at this point.
We've got it enlarged to A3, I think. It's that size there, and it's still almost impossible to read.
Chair, I do apologise for that. We had intended to bring with us big A3 copies, and that was what's been printed off at the moment. I understand you've asked for that as well. I'm really sorry about that. Okay, so we will bring the bigger version. We tried technologically through a number of means to create a spreadsheet that had bigger writing on it. We found that difficult, but the papers are coming through and will be tabled before we reach that stage. But you're quite right. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor McKee. Item 3, minutes of meeting of 17th January 2013. I'm happy to say that this is an accurate minute. Thank you. Moving on to item 4, Education Services Religious Observance Policy. Report by Director of Education Services, and I believe that Dr Bridson is here to answer any questions should that be required, and if you have anything additional to add to the report. We also have a request from our church representative who would like to say a few words before we go into session and open the floor to members, and if members are happy with that, I'll bring them in at this point. Happy? Mr McQuiston.
No, just very briefly to say a comment on the leaflet I've just given out. I actually issued that at an Education Committee meeting a few months ago, so it's nothing new, to be honest. Historically, as you probably know, education was maintained by the church for the first 250 years in this country, right up until 1872, and by the state for the last 140 years. So the proportion is in favour of the church for education. Perhaps I could just draw members' attention to one interesting fact, that during the period of the Scottish Enlightenment, that's the time of David Hume, Adam Smith, Robert Burns, schooling was under church management, and dare I suggest that the levels of literacy at that time were outshone the rest of Europe. I make no further comment on that. Thank you, folks, for reading that.
Thank you, Mr McQuiston. Reverend McFadden.
The policy presented applies to all schools in the region, including our denominational schools, which have a particular Roman Catholic ethos and religious tradition. This ethos is a living and growing spirit that permeates the whole of the life of the school and already determines the practice of religious observance. In denominational schools, Roman Catholic prayer and liturgy distinctively shapes the nature and the frequency of religious observance, and the liturgical year and particular religious feasts provide its structure. To support teachers and chaplains, the Scottish Catholic Education Service offers numerous resources.
Thank you, Reverend McFadden. Canon Paisley.
Thank you, Chair. What I'd like to emphasise is that it's important to note that what lies behind this policy is a much broader philosophy than the words religious observance might imply. It's about developing pupils' and schools' ability to articulate their core values, both as individuals and as a community. As such, I think it will contribute very positively to the health and well-being of individuals, the school community, and indeed society as a whole. Good practice will be to model implementation by a collaborative approach, supported by resources, and the plans are to make those available via GLOW and indeed other networks, together with the dissemination of best practice through the provision of local resources such as a local delivery of the course that's referred to in the papers, Glasgow University's RO Design and Practice course. I hope that helps, and we'll be pleased to answer further questions.
Well, thank you very much, all three of you, for your contribution. And if members do have questions that are more appropriate for you to answer, that would be very much appreciated. Dr. Bryson, do you have anything further to add?
Just to thank the church representatives for supporting the head teachers in bringing this policy to committee.
Absolutely. Councillor McKee.
Thanks, Chair. I find this it's a very sensitive subject, this, and the last speaker kind of addressed some of my issues regarding what they mean by observance. Now, my understanding at the present moment is that schools educate children on most religions, if not all religions. And what are you looking for here that is different from encouraging youngsters and training youngsters on all religions? But I think an understanding of all religions leads to a better community, people working together, and youngsters working together, and they've no differences. What are you looking for here different from that?
Would Canon Paisley or Mr. McQuiston, Reverend McFadden, like to respond?
Yeah, I think there's a distinction here between, and Robin will pick it up, no doubt, between the religious observance and the religious education. Religious education forms a key part of the curriculum for excellence. Religious observance is much more to do with, let's say, whole school assemblies where values of the school are underlined, where aspirations are identified, where the general mood of that school is characterized. And perhaps the word religious under the title religious observance is slightly skewing it the wrong way, I'm not sure. But Councillor is absolutely right. I think in today's society, knowledge of faith systems and non-faith systems is absolutely critical for social tolerance and understanding. So religious observance is a whole school event as opposed to, let's say, religious education, which is largely channeled through the classroom.
Canon Paisley?
Could I just add to that and thank Councillor McKee for his comment, because he's gone to the heart of an issue that we're very concerned that people understand. And if you take an example from one of the schools that I act as a chaplain to, one of their core values, which has been arrived at through consultation with pupils, with teachers, and with parents, is respect. So that one of the things that they're trying to create within the community of the school is respect for difference. And that would be very true of different religions, for instance. So that it's not promoting one particular way of seeing things, but understanding that other people's different views are held honestly and they need to be respected. So that's what religious observance is about. And those who were involved in the drafting of the guidelines in 2004 actually wanted to lose the word religious, and just call it spiritual development. And if you look at item 2.1 in the appendix, two definitions of what it is there, I think are the best thing to hang on to. But the last thing I would say is that it's not to deny, as Robert has already reminded us, that the religious tradition of our country actually provides enormous resources to address this agenda. But it's not just about religion.
Are you happy with that, Councillor McKee? Good, thank you. Councillor Carson?
Thank you, Chair. I must admit, I read this over and over and over and over again, and it's not until Mr McQuiston actually, his last comments there, it actually sort of started to make sense. I know he was a good teacher in my day at the academy, which is a long time ago. I'm still not very good at French, but anyway, but I think it's all come to light now just what it meant. What I was worried about was this was actually potentially dumbing down what was already there, which seems to be the sort of trend across the UK. So I'm delighted that, in speaking with my colleagues, I think the whole school philosophy and principles and whatever are important. So thank you for that.
No, I would certainly endorse that comment and would hope that this certainly is not a dumbing down and is more a reinforcement of the values and the need for it within our schools. Councillor McClung? Macomb.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. I would just draw members' attention to 4.1, the Scottish Government's guidance, which I believe is an excellent summary of the situation. A very, very balanced summary, very fair. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I have one question. On page 13, bullet point 8, the rights of parents. How do we inform parents within the school as to how, well, if they choose not to allow their children to participate, what's the process for that? How are they informed of that?
That would be the responsibility of the head teacher. So at a school level, the parent would have ample opportunity to discuss any concerns that they would have with the head teacher, and at that point, the processes would be explained to them.
Thank you very much. Do you have any other members? Councillor Marshall.
On that same point, when you're exploring the options and it's been explained, do the parents still have the right for the child to opt out?
Yes, I think that's quite clearly stated in there. I just wondered what the process was for informing the parents of that. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you. Can I just take that one step further? You know, parents have the right to opt out, which I entirely agree with. You know, it's their beliefs, it's how they want to, for their children and that. What happens in a school, and I've seen this happening before in primary schools, where a child of a Jehovah's Witness doesn't take part in any services at the start and gets shoved into a corridor, sitting with a secretary by themselves, and feeling excluded, and the child doesn't feel part of the school. Is there anything that's being done to, have an inclusive approach for that, the child or children that, the parents don't want to be involved in it? And just one thing before I go, in 7.1, it's a guidance here that states head teachers are encouraged to engage in full discussion with chaplains and other faith group leaders in the plan implementation. I think that should be compulsory. I don't think the head teachers should have a choice. I think, that is, it should be implicit in carrying this forward.
Yeah, I would agree with that comment. I'm not sure that we can change Scottish Government's guidance, but I think that we, as an authority, we can stress that it is almost compulsory to do so rather than guidance in itself.
I know just a couple of points there, very interesting. With regard to the child withdrawn, 8.3 does make it clear that suitable arrangements for the child to participate in a worthwhile alternative activity. Now, that might or might not be difficult. I don't know. It's up to head teachers. But certainly, the councillor is absolutely right. It's terribly important that the child is not shuffled off into a corridor, etc., etc. The other point with regard to chaplaincy and discussions with chaplains and so on, I couldn't agree with you more. The setting up of chaplaincy teams in primary and secondary sectors is absolutely essential. But I don't think it's, if you like, compulsory at the moment.
Thank you. Do I have any other members? Canon Paisley?
I'd just like to add to that and emphasise what I said at the end of my opening remarks about a local version of the course that is referred to in the guidelines. It's called RO Design and Practice. It's been developed with the University of Glasgow. And discussions are well advanced to provide a local version here, which will make it much more accessible for teachers. But the good practice that is commended in that course is to form RO teams of teachers, chaplains, pupils, parents, everybody who's a stakeholder. So the answer to the question that Councillor Nicholson is wanting to be emphasised is our resources that are going to be provided as part of the region's support for this will push that particular good practice, and I think will lead to enhancement of this particular material.
Thank you very much for that. I think that was a very useful comment. With that, we'll move to the recommendations, and I'd just like to thank the Church representatives for their helpful contributions this morning and their continued support and good joint working with the schools, and long may it continue. If we look at the recommendations, we're simply asked to agree the religious observance policy for Dumfries and Galloway schools as detailed in Appendix 1. Are members happy to do so? Yep, thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry, members, we're waiting on Peter Nelson coming through for item 5. And there he is. I'll just give him a moment to get settled. Eh? Okay, moving on to item 5, Education Services, Capital Programme and Property Issues. Again, report by Director of Education Services. We have Mr Nelson and Mr Foss here to answer questions from members. Do you have anything further to add to the report? Okay, happy to open the floor to members. Councillor Witt.
Thank you, Chair. I'm particularly interested in item 3.4.10. I wondered if we could have some clarity regarding the situation where we have already had some indication from a party who may be interested in using this property, which is now surplus to education requirements. What's the procedure for disposing of it? Is someone given preferred status and having already indicated an interest in using this property?
Mr Nelson.
Yes, thank you. Yes, we have already entered into the disposal process. So the first thing we did was the School Estate Management Group agreed that the building was surplus to their needs. Then the next thing is the next part of the process is we then ask every other department if they have a need for this facility. Thereafter, there is a community involvement in a lot of buildings, but normally we would then put it straight for sale. That's the disposal process. But of course there is a community involvement in a number of buildings around in our area. So I can't really give you any more information on that yet, but I don't think there is preferred status in any of them.
I'd like to come back in, Councillor Witt.
Thank you. So if sometime in the past someone has indicated that they might have an interest in this property, they would be kept in the loop as regards to the way things have been proceeding.
Councillor Marshall.
Just on the same issue with regards to that, if there is expressions of interest by groups out with council departments, is it a case of that it just goes on the open market for sale, or do you also enter into negotiations on, say, a long-term lease, etc.? I just want to clarify that. And the second part is, what's the estimated value of the old church?
To answer your last question first, I don't have that in my head, what the value is. But again, to reiterate, there is a disposal process, but there is always community involvement before the final for sale. But there is a council process involved in this. Don't have that.
Perhaps if you could get that information to Councillor Marshall out with committee, that would be very useful. Councillor Dempster.
Thanks, Chair. On the last subject, I wasn't really going to mention it other than to say that we now have a council policy that makes sure we actually deal with properties that we vacate, and even if it comes to demolition, we do not want to see boarded up buildings stuck in the middle of Dumfries, because we've got that elsewhere and it's an absolute nightmare. The only thing I would add to that is that if it's within the curtilage Dumfries Academy, you might actually want to retain it until we decide what we're going to do with the academy, and there are reports later on in the agenda about other schooling issues. Anyway, that's that aside. Kirkcudbright Academy is now number 6 on the revised school investment priority list. And I see that's 344, and I see 345, the Cochrane Hall has been proposed for some investment. I wouldn't want us, and I'm sure Peter will be able to put my mind at rest, but I wouldn't want us to suddenly discover that Kirkcudbright Academy is in such a bad state that we need another new academy, and at the same time we're doing up a hall that will then become a nonsense because it'll be a different location from any new school we might have to create. So I would hope that that's not the case, but I'm sure Peter will be able to put my mind at rest on that. On the Annan Academy, I've seen this a couple of times, this Learning Plaza, and I would like just a wee bit of information about what exactly is a Learning Plaza, and if it's something that can be incorporated in other schools, if it's seen to be something that's innovative or new or forward-thinking that would enhance the educational opportunities of kids elsewhere. And lastly, you'll not be surprised to know that I'm interested in the Sankar Academy CCTV tie-in to the town centre. That's been a long, dreary saga. And just a couple of things. Do we need to upgrade the CCTV cameras in the schools to be compatible? And where are we with that in relation to the overall CCTV installation commencing on site?
Finance was in the order you said. Kirkcudbright Academy, we've done quite a bit of work already looking at.
Sorry, Mr. Nelson, can you speak into the mic, because I have picked up on some of the recordings that if people turn, it doesn't get picked up very well. Sorry.
Turn that way a wee bit. Kirkcudbright Academy, there is no issue with us building a new school there. We're looking at the rationalisation of the school, which might include changing some of the shape of some of the buildings. You know, we might knock a part down and build another part on, but we're not looking at wholesale changes to the building. The building isn't in that bad a condition. It's quite tired, and we're looking to bring it forward to suit the curriculum for excellence. So there's no problem with the Cochrane Hall, for instance. The one thing that's maybe important to note there is we're linking all this to the Kirkcudbright Charter works that are being carried out in the whole of the town. Annan Academy, if I can leave the Learning Plaza, I'll let Lam tell you a bit more on that one. Sankar, what we've been doing, we've been working with the police to look at, and this is over a number of years, is we have high definition CCTV, and we're looking to put high definition CCTV outside school grounds. I'll give you, for instance, Easter eggs. If there's a flag up that said there was a fire at Easter eggs, the police or the fire could actually dial up that camera and check if it was a bin on fire or the school was on fire, and then they make an appropriate response. So it's actually just trying to use the stuff that's already there and linking them together to be far better.
In relation to the Learning Plaza at Annan Academy, I'll just give you a little bit of background on that one. The school itself, with the new drama performing arts facility opening, has released accommodation within the existing building. So due to that, we've had a look at some of the areas in there and tried to figure out maybe a better way of using those spaces. Traditionally, it would have been one teacher, one classroom, that setup. But the space that we've identified allows us to create an open plan area that we're calling the plaza. Now, inside that will allow us to bring possibly whole year groups together for a different learning experience. The setup of the space itself will be various different areas inside there. One will be a more formal learning space, one a wee bit less formal, going from an auditorium style space to a soft seating, so that it caters for a wider range of experiences that the youngsters will go through. The benefit of doing this at Annan as, I guess, an experiment is to see if it works before rolling it out anywhere else. There's quite a few models already in Scotland where this has been created, and it's worked really successfully. We've got plans on paper already for what this is going to look like. We've met with the school a couple of times, and they're quite excited about the process that we're going to go through for this. It is very much about having the space to try this out in before it's rolled out anywhere else. So Annan's given us the ability to do that.
Mr. Dempster?
Hey, thanks, Chair. So is that similar to some of the space that's available in places like Wallace Hall? I mean, have you copied that into the the Wallace Hall construction, or is this something completely different? Because there's quite a huge open space at the frontage of Wallace Hall Academy that people use from time to time. It's adjacent to the main hall.
That might be an option further down the line, but that's more a social space, more a circulation space at Wallace Hall. Annan is separate. It's taking older existing teaching space that's been dedicated specifically for that and creating an area that would be used for learning and teaching. It's probably equivalent to about 4 classrooms, so you're looking at 200 metres squared. But within there, as I say, there will be discrete areas for different activities. But because the way it's designed as an open plan area, it would allow you to take all of your first year English pupils there, or whatever sector, whatever stage, whatever age, whatever mixture you wanted to look at, and be able to bring those classes together, more in line with Curriculum for Excellence and some of the outcomes and experiences that we're looking to achieve.
I think that's.
I'll maybe engage further with the officer in my own time, Chair, just for further debate, because clearly that illustrates that there's an opportunity where there's a huge capacity in schools that are not maybe working to full capacity to copy that if it's seen to be a success story, and that's something I'd be interested in that. Thanks.
I think as an education committee we would be interested to find down the line in a few months' time how effective that's been, and if it has been effective, how we can roll it out to other schools, and maybe through a future capital programme report we could just get an update on the efficiency of that particular scheme. Mr Nelson.
Would it be useful for us to actually issue a copy of the drawings to all the members by PDF, by email?
Yeah, if you could email, that would be excellent. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Chair. If you allow me, I'll try and use this as the 3.4.10 in the Academy as a hook for my question. Obviously, there's a new dining hall in the Academy and the food provided there, and it's to do with the food that's provided there. Obviously, there's been a lot of press, regarding the type of contamination within certain foodstuffs, and I wondered if, the school meals, for example, that no food that's been served in the schools have been contaminated in such a way as has been portrayed in the press, and the school meal guarantee that, that there's adequate procedures in place for the quality guarantee that no contamination will take place. I know there is a wider in all community facilities, for example, DG1, but school kids actually use DG1 as well. They from the school, they go to the DG1 and they buy food out of there as well. And I just wondered overall, whether there are actual adequate procedures to guarantee that there's been no contamination in any food, because I've been asked that by, some constituents regarding the schools. Also, I know that there's other types of contamination, like port contamination in food, and that, apart from having religious, apart from the religious objections, there may be medical implications for people with certain diseases, like Crohn's disease, for example, which could create difficulties for individuals.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. That was a very sugary nail, but we'll take it. I actually share your concerns entirely. I think it's been a horrendous national story, and certainly we don't have any representatives here from DG First today to answer those questions. And I think it's something that, as a directorate and as a committee, we will take away today and get these answers to members in as timely a fashion as possible, because we're all concerned about it, absolutely, and very valid to raise it on your sugary nail. Councillor Gilroy. Oh, sorry, Councillor Marshall.
Sure, apart from actually getting the information from DG First, probably environmental standards as well.
No, the director will take that away today. Councillor Gilroy.
Well, just on that, we do have a DG First Management Committee next Tuesday, and I shall ask for verbal part of the report done for that. I'm glad that Kukubri Academy is going to be lifted out of the tired zone. That will be very welcome. It's not needing to be renewed, but it is certainly needing to and just to lift it and make it more of a good educational building. But what I'm actually quite more interested in is the Cochrane Hall and your work with the Kukubri Charter. I do hope you are working with the Kukubri Charter. I'm not quite sure how you're doing it, because at the last 2 area committees ago, we got a report on various buildings in Kirkcudbright, and one of the things that was in the report was that suddenly the Johnson School, which had been declared surplus by the Education Committee 3 years ago, probably, was going to be used to decant pupils from Kirkcudbright Academy. And I don't know where that came from. I don't know what kind of decant it was for. And I just wondered whether that was through working with Kirkcudbright Charter, but it certainly was news to me. So and I just wondered if you could enlighten me on that.
Mr. Foss?
I think that there's maybe been a bit of confusion somewhere along the lines. When we're looking at laying out the capital programme and we have Kirkcudbright Academy campus on there, we haven't yet got into the feasibility of the amount of the school that needs to be refurbished, replaced, renewed. Given a quick desktop exercise, it looks like it's the middle section that's the most tired that would need to be replaced. That's in effect about 18 teaching spaces. So it's about half the size of the school. To be able to do that, there is obviously the potential for a decant. We have to look at how we're actually going to design around that. It might be phased so that we can do sections at a time, as Douglas Stewart was, and there wasn't a decant required for that, but we're just trying to keep all the options on the table. If there is a decant required, do we bring in a removable school and put it in the playing fields or in the grassed area at the front? Do we look round about us at what there is? And one option that we would be foolish not to consider would be the use of the Johnson School. Now, nobody's said there will be a decant. Nobody's stated that we would actually end up going there, but it would be something we would need to consider. If we look at the costs involved in the potential for a demountable school for 18 class spaces, you're getting up beyond £1 million investment for the length of time that it would have to be there. We would have to obviously weigh that up against the facilities that are round about us in the town that aren't being used. Now, if Johnston happened to be available and it was still empty, it might only cost £400,000 to bring that back up to a usable condition. And if the timing of that fits in with the Kirkcudbright Charter, and then it hands back a building that's had investment into it, that's in a better condition, then I would see that as a positive step for the community as well. But all the detail still has to be talked through. We still need to get through the design part to determine what's going to be replaced before we know what size of decant is required.
Director?
Yeah, I think though thanks Chair, I think it is though really important to highlight the fact that because discussion around possible options take place, that doesn't mean that's the option we're going for. And it would be quite easy to take away even from discussion today. We're looking really seriously at Johnson. We're not necessarily the perfect solution, as far as I'm concerned, would be no decant at all and a phased agenda. That would be ideal, the way we've done it at Annan, the way we've done it in Douglas Stewart, and that may be possible. And that decision can't come until we look at the size of the challenge that we have. So I think it's really important. It was important that Mr. Foss highlighted for you why Johnson School might be an option. It's really important to recognise it's not necessarily the favoured option.
Councillor Gilroy?
Just come back a minute. So what is your workings with the Kirkcudbright Charter Group, the Community Trust? They got to understand what can happen there, because the Johnson School is a very important part of their assessment of what buildings there are and how they're used.
Yeah, we have been working with the Community and Customer Services on this matter, who are working with Kirkcudbright, the Community Trust in Kirkcudbright, sorry. But there are no decisions that have been made at all, particularly to do with the school. We're at such an early stage with the school, where, as the Director indicated, that we'd be looking at several options, and we'd be really failing in our duties if we didn't consider all the options. But the reality is potentially using other buildings would be almost a last step. We've almost refurbished all of Kirkcudbright Academy and all of Douglas Stewart with no decant. So we've done that in the past, so we would be doing the same, if possible, within Kirkcudbright as well. But we have been working with...
Councillor Carson, you're noted down to speak later, but I think you maybe want to pick up something
Yeah,
on this.
it's on this point. I know we're sitting here shaking our heads to say that Johnson School it was actually part of the Stewart Area Committee that someone mentioned the Johnson School with regards to a potentially being used when the academy was developed. Now, that didn't just come out of the air, that was actually in a paper, and it certainly, the Johnson School issue and the buildings review in Kirkcudbright is quite an emotive subject, and it was in the Galloway News and in the papers, and it's certainly not helpful, and that must have come from someone. It wasn't just picked out there to be in a paper, and I think we need to be really careful when we're discussing buildings and things that the public or the press don't pick up and make things bigger than they actually are. Even from the discussions today, we've got to be careful. But, you know, it wasn't just pulled out of the blue. It was actually part of the Stewart Area Committee papers that the Johnson School was discussed as possibly a decant.
Yeah, again, if I could come in on that, I think it's really important to highlight that I'm presuming that would have appeared in a paper not as a decision, but the fact that because there'll be a major refurbishment and improvement in Kirkcudbright Academy, a number of options will need to be looked at, and presumably in that paper, as mentioned, one possible option being Johnson School. So nobody's disagreed with that. I think it's just my worry is that people run away with that as what's going to happen, whereas we think probably the ideal option is we don't have to decant. The other thing is, certainly I know that I have replied recently to David Lockwood to help with comments around papers that are going to area committee to highlight the latest stage that we're at, for example, with the Cochrane Hall and how that might support the community or otherwise. So I know the links are there to make replies, but I think I would like to go away from today and just double check that we've absolutely got the right links between the people that are talking about the various issues. And I'll do that for you.
Thank you for that. Councillor McKee?
Mine was on the same point, Chair.
Sorry, Councillor Dempster.
And it is very big. What is the Kirkcudbright Charter Trust and what's the relationship with it?
I don't know.
Be interesting if you did, Chair. I'm just interested in why we're linked with them and what a relationship is with them and what it is in essence in any case.
I'll bring in the Vice Chair at this point.
Do my best to get this right. I don't want to offend the Kirkcudbright Charter. They're a group of residents in and around Kirkcudbright who are looking at potential uses for a number of the public buildings in the town, and I've had a particular look at what might be done potentially with the Johnson Primary School as a future community asset. The other thing that I just wanted to say was that the next meeting of the Stewart Area Committee is next Wednesday, and there is a paper on this at that meeting. So if we can be absolutely clear that everything is tied up and that we do have absolute clarity, I think that would be immensely helpful, because I know these people are very interested in this and I've been doing a lot of work on it. But that's a sort of nutshell, kind of brief encapsulation of what the Charter is about.
Director.
Just again, for absolute clarity, the links that I am making are with those people in the council who are related to the area committee.
Is that no crossing over the Snappy review? And I know Snappy's been abandoned now, and officers will make decisions on what properties become used for the community, etc., etc. Is there no a difficulty or a challenge in that?
Vice Chair.
This basically goes back to previous plans that surrounded potential use, in fact, for the town hall in Kirkcudbright and the possibility of having an art gallery as part of a refurbished town hall. The process that was adopted to come to that potential solution was what really kind of gave rise to Snappy as an idea. It preceded Snappy. It's not necessarily exactly the same. Things being what they are, it's also now slightly changed and moved on from that agenda anyway. The original proposals did not particularly concern Johnson Primary School, because that at that time had been declared surplus and wasn't really in the mix. However, things have moved on. The Charter now exists as a group, and Johnson Primary School is very much an area of focus now in the community, to a greater extent perhaps than it was when we started out on the process, which is now 2 or 3 years ago.
Thank you for that, Vice Chair. I have quite a number of members still wishing to speak. Councillor McKee, then Councillor Lever and Councillor Wiper.
Thanks, Chair. My question actually has been answered, and it would appear that Charter's another name for a community council. Avoid that. Could I just ask that when the decision, you've got information regarding the food as questioned by Councillor Nicholson, could he ensure that that's sent to all councillors? Because no doubt we'll all be asked a similar sort of question. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely, not a problem. Thank you. Councillor Lever.
Thank you, Chair. I was interested to read 3.4.11, biomass heating system. There's a report going to come to PHE on the benefits of actually having biomass boilers in these 5 schools. And I think it's a missed opportunity that we don't actually have biomass boilers in the PPP schools. That's the benefits of hindsight, I think. But I raised this before. I think what would be helpful in terms of our carbon reduction commitment would be to have, where feasible, every radiator in all our schools fitted with individual thermostats, because one of the big complaints I get from teachers is they've got no control in how hot rooms are within their schools. So for a question of maybe it's about £30 per radiator, we could actually make quite a significant reduction in our carbon footprint and also make it much more comfortable for teachers and pupils in the schools. I note 3.4.8 about Park Primary School. Lots being made about the carbon reduction, etc., and how poorly insulated it is. But I was just, by matter of interest, browsing through the report which came to the, I think it was the September meeting of the Schools Education Committee. And I know, according to this, that the energy rating of Park Primary is B, which is quite good. So that doesn't really tie in with what's in this report, as far as I can see.
Mr. Nelson.
If I mention the jargon TRVs, the thermostatic radiator valve, I have actually been in discussion with the sustainability team about a programme of installing TRVs on radiators in schools that have not been refurbished of late. So we're actually rolling down through that. In the discussion about Park Primary School, there was previously some problems of structural cracking at that school, and we looked at it, and as part of the surveys, we found that the roof itself was in very poor condition and leaking. So the opportunity then, we had to do something with the roof, and at that time, from an emerging issue point of view, it would seem more logical to do all the work at the external of that school at the one time. That's the reason why it's been done maybe potentially quicker than some others.
Follow up, Councillor Lever.
Just in terms of the programme, I'd rather have an accelerated programme than a rolling programme. Rolling sounds fairly leisurely, so I'd like to see more effort being made, because it does actually benefit us in terms of the amount we're using to heat these schools. So it's effectively a spend to save.
I think the officers have taken that on board, and hopefully we'll see that in a future capital report as well. Do you want to come back on that, Mr. Nelson?
Could I also indicate that at the moment we're looking at 4 other schools for biomass heating systems as well.
Councillor Wiper.
Thank you, Chair. Just to go back briefly to the Kirkcudbright Academy Cochrane Hall issue, I just wondered why it was deemed a priority to do the Cochrane Hall before the main building, because the main building, in most people's opinion, is very tired looking, and the Cochrane Hall doesn't get used that much, in my knowledge. My second question would be, when the Cochrane Hall is finished, is there going to be some assurances that people can actually get to use it? Because I've had quite a few people in the town say to me that they try to hire the Cochrane Hall at the weekend to hold an event or a concert or something, and they're told that they can't have it because there's nobody available to actually go and open it up. So, I mean, if they're going to be making an investment in the place, then it would be nice to have it available at all times. And the third point is just to add a little bit to about the Kirkcudbright Trust, Kirkcudbright Charter. As far as I'm aware, the Kirkcudbright Community Trust was then called the Community Charter, and they were tasked with the review on the buildings in the town, because it was felt that whatever outcome came out of that, that as a charter, as opposed to a local authority, they would be in a better position to attract funding for it. And that was really the main reason that they were tasked with this. Thank you.
Thank you for that information. Director.
Thanks, Chair. If I could pick up then on the first 2 points. The reason it was Cochrane Hall first was specifically because we asked the school. There was a real need for investment in Kirkcudbright Academy. They moved up the list as we've delivered in other areas. And we were very clear with them, the Chief Executive and myself actually visited the school, and we said, you know, in terms of what is the most immediate, biggest immediate priority that would lift the ethos of the school and lift the sense of for young people about getting the opportunity to work in a really good environment. And they were very, very clear that the first stop was the Cochrane Hall. That was the reason for that. The second issue, because of the ongoing challenges that we know as a council we have over the next 2 or 3 years in terms of financial restraints and constraints, there's a review of leisure and sport and community use of school buildings coming at quite a high level, where we need to look really carefully at the impact of decisions that have been taken to try to reduce the number of buildings that we have in our council, whilst recognising that in many cases that won't impact in the number of schools that we have, and therefore we need to make far more use of schools for communities. So that's a review that's coming on stream at the moment. Okay.
Thank you for that. Councillor Carson, has your point been covered? Okay. I move on to Councillor McClung, and then Councillor McComb, Councillor Dempster and Councillor Diggle.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's to go to 3.4.2, not in particularly Glenluce Primary School, it's regarding the turbines. While I don't want to prejudge any decisions that's made in the next item, it says further sites such as Shawhead Primary School are being considered for turbines. However, item 6 is recommending that it's a modular school that could be moved. Are we facing a situation where there could be a decision at some point in the future to move the school and we're left with 3 turbines in the middle of nowhere?
Director.
I would suggest we'll cover that point in the next paper.
Councillor McComb? Oh, sorry, Mr Nelson.
If I could make a short point about Glenluce itself, the turbines are not the ones you normally see go in that direction. They actually spin in this, they're helical to reduce the noise, and they're actually, if anybody watched the Olympics, you could see them all right along. We've installed them there almost like a pilot, and we were looking for 5 somethings from it, and we're actually getting 9 somethings from it at the moment. So we're actually, I can't remember whether it's kilowatts per such and such. So we're actually getting more feedback on the feed-in tariff than we actually anticipated. So, and the school will benefit from that as well.
Something's far too technical for me. Councillor McComb.
Thanks, Chair. In relation to 3411, the biomass heating systems, what guarantees are there that the biomass is being sourced locally? Because I'm sure, as you appreciate, if it's coming from the length and breadth of the country, any carbon saving you have from the biomass heating is offset by the fuel used in transport.
Mr Nelson.
I can confirm that currently we are receiving biomass pellets from Irvine. We've been getting some from Penrith. We'd like to have some more local, absolutely, and we haven't been in discussion with Buccleuch Estates as well. They've got quite a few trees round about here, so we are trying our best to make sure we get as much locally sourced material as possible.
Thank you for that. Councillor Dempster.
You allowed me earlier, Chair, point's been covered.
Thank you. Councillor Diggle.
Thank you, Chair. 3.4.11, I was just wondering when that report will be coming back to us.
I believe it will be coming back to the P&R committee. We would hope it would be in March. If it isn't in March, it will be the following one. The important element to this is the implementation part of it, is to ensure that any mistakes that we might have done in the past, we don't make in the future, which is the reason for the post-occupancy evaluation. And we've been in discussion with a number of parties, including DG First, as to how, once the installations are in there, we actually make the best use of them and they're looked after properly, etc., etc. So that's why it's taken a wee bit longer than we'd hoped. But we're trying to make it as wholesome a report as possible and move on.
That I think there was a feeling that the Education Committee would like that information as well, but rather than bringing a report back to Education Committee and having too large an agenda, if that information could be emailed out to all of us for information after PhD, that would be useful. Okay. Final speaker, and then I'll move to the recommendations. Councillor Yin.
Thank you,
sorry.
Chair. I want to refer members to 3.4.7, Dumfries High School windows and external doors renewal. And I'm very happy to see this work is going ahead. I want to congratulate to all officers to bring it forward, and I hope the work goes well for the high school.
Thank you, Councillor. So I have Councillor Nicholl and then one second speaker, and then I'll move to recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. To do with the Glenluce Primary School helical wind turbines, you have permission, or you had permission, you now have permission for 2 heights of turbines. I understand which ones were put up. And maybe I may need to come back on this.
The taller one, the 18-metre one, not the 15-metre.
Could I come back, Chair, just to say that was it a retrospective application? Because I understand they were up before the planning permission was actually given.
I don't think that's the case, but I'm sure I can confirm one way or another to you directly. I don't think that is the case.
Well, people on their way to the meeting saw them.
Okay.
And it was granted at that meeting. So
I believe we were putting the foundations in before the final application. That's not what I was told.
Thank you. Final speaker, Councillor Carson.
Thanks, Chair. Just back to the wind turbines. I welcome these sort of installations, but it seems strange to have Shawhead Primary School in there as an example. It's a very small school with a small school roll. What criteria is set to decide which primary schools or secondary schools actually get considered for these turbines? And there's any relation to the number of pupils and the benefit to the school, or how is it actually, what's the role in programme that would decide where they were going?
We tend to look at the location. The location is actually the most important element to this. And that's the reasons why we've been looking at helical turbines. Normal turbines, you can't put them anywhere, really, because of the noise of the blades. And the reason to use the Glenluce one, which is semi-urban almost, is do we have a noise problem? We don't think they would have. Let's try them out. Of course, there's loads of schools like Hardgate where you could easily put, so almost semi-urban locations would be relatively simple to put in turbines and try and make as much of the schools be as carbon neutral as possible. Like for instance, Beta is actually a carbon neutral school because it has biomass and other like solar panels and PV panels. So in actual fact, it's carbon neutral from the carbon commitment point of view. And as we go through, particularly small schools, that will come up next, as we're looking to make as many of our small schools as carbon neutral as we possibly can. And so the location is actually key at the present time. Of course, we would look at the other strategic to do with energy management. That's one of our key ones, is its location. That's what you're...
Okay, I'm going to allow Councillor Wyper a teeny question.
15 seconds. I just wondered if in the refurbishment of various schools, are there plans to put PV panels on or whatever? Seems it would make sense.
In the last 2 years, we've spent £2.2 million on PV panels in schools and other properties as well. And I also meet with the sustainability team on a monthly basis to consider future programmes of PV panels on future number of schools as well.
Thank you for that. Okay, just as we're moving to the recommendations, there was a couple of points that members raised that don't necessarily need to be contained within the recommendations, and certainly the information that Councillor Nicholson has asked for in relation to food quality and assurances in that respect in our schools. We will get that information to members as soon as possible. And I think there was an issue that Councillor Marshall was going to follow up with Mr Nelson afterwards, if that's okay. So if we move to the recommendations, members are asked at 2.1 to agree the current position on the 2012-13 Education Services and Maintenance Block Capital Programme as indicated in Table 1. Are members happy to agree? 2.2, agree ongoing development of priority projects in the Education Services Capital Programme for 13-14 as detailed in 3.3.1. Members happy to agree? 2.3, agree the inclusion of the projects in Table 2 within the Education Services 2013 and 13-14 Capital Maintenance Programme And at 2.4, note that the Dumfries Academy Old Dining Hall is surplus to Education Services requirements and will enter into the disposal process as detailed in 3.4.10. Members happy to agree those recommendations? Good, thank you. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I think you have to stay for the next report anyway. Okay, moving on to item 6, Shawhead Primary School New School Provision and Options Appraisal. This report's in front of members, obviously, to look at various options for consideration for Shawhead Primary School. Mr Nelson and Mr Foss are here to answer any further questions. I think it's a very interesting report, and it's certainly given a lot of members food for thought, and I think there'll be some fairly interesting questions that will come from the floor. But if you have nothing further to add to the report, Mr Nelson.
We have had a number of discussions with the Scottish Government Schools Directorate on this matter, and a number of other authorities are doing exactly the same as we are in facilities like these.
Thank you for that. Councillor Lever?
Yeah, I note the option which is being looked at is to have a designed capacity for 50 pupils. What information do we have on the roll? At the moment it stands at 16. It was 18 in January 2010 when the last HMIE inspection was carried out. I presume we can have some sort of prediction of what it's going to be over the next 5 or 6 years in terms of it. I mean, are we actually building something which is far too big for the number of pupils who are going to use it in the future?
Mr Foss?
You're right about the current role just now, but having spoken with the school, it's looking like they're going to be up to 20, 21 pupils, which is still, if it's 20, 21, it's still single teacher. However, the space and the capacity built into the design is actually one room. It could accommodate 50 if further down the line we added a dividing wall in there. So it's the flexibility that we're trying to add into the facility. The birth rates, given that they're now out of sync with the numbers that we're going to see coming in next year, if that trend continues, and with the possible attraction of the new school there, it's anticipated that the role will keep rising up to the point where we will require 2 teachers and 2 class spaces within that facility.
Follow up, Councillor Lever?
Yeah, well, I made reference earlier to the report which came in September in terms of the current position of the schools and the status. Shawhead's at number 45, so why is that being taken as a priority over the other 44 within that? And as I say, we've got 16 pupils there at the moment. I've got Lockerbriggs in my own ward, which is rated at 65. It's now got 140 something pupils. It's got a capacity for 430. And I think £1 million invested in Lockerbriggs would totally transform it at a fraction of the cost of building a new school at Shawhead for 50 pupils who don't actually exist at the moment.
The school itself needs investment, whatever we do. We are duty bound to keep the school wind, watertight, safe and secure, irrespective of where it sits within the priority list. Given the condition of the building, detailed through the content of the document, there's substantial investment required at the building anyway. So that's why we conducted the feasibility study on the building to look at what the best option would be, given the investment requirements just purely to bring it up to those key points, safe, secure, wind and watertight. It's not too far away from the actual the costs detailed in there. Also, the building, you know, there's a picture in the report about it, and it's a very tired building. The strategic hooks based around that building do put it in a position of 45 on the priority list. However, the main elements inside the condition rating itself are based on whether the roof is in a watertight condition and whether its walls are sound as well. So that's the 2 major elements that contribute to the condition rating on the school. The rest of it, however, as an envelope, is in such a dilapidated condition that, you know, whatever we do, we need to invest big money into this school.
Chair, if I could just add something to that. I mean, I think that's a really good question from Councillor Lever about how come if it's so bad, why is it number 45? The reason for that, if you remember the way that we set up with agreement of this council and this committee, the priority list was to take into account a number of factors. One of the factors we took into account was the number of pupils that we could impact on with investment. Right, so that's one of the numbers that come, the number crunching factors. What that does is it automatically pushes the really wee schools much further down the list for major investment, for the very reason that you've highlighted, Councillor Lever, is that we have qualms about big investment for a small number of kids. So what's happened there is that the small number of kids in Shawhead has meant that that factor pushed them well down. But in Shawhead's case, it's the one school in the authority that we literally could not keep running without sorting it because it's in such a bad state in terms of condition. So that's why there's a gap between the two things. Can I maybe just add something also strategically here? It's the flexibility issue here that's really, really critical, and I know there'll be more questions about this. We're desperately trying to get away from short-termism around the school provision. And we do know that there will be longer term challenges in our authority around finances over the next 3 or 4 years and beyond. That can mean us taking as a committee decisions that are not always the ones of least resistance. We don't have a closure policy. No, as I understand it currently, no party in Dumfries and Galloway is for a programme of school closures. We are therefore looking to maintain the schools that we have and continue to maintain the really strong attainment achievement record that we've got with the challenges that are around. One way to do that is in the management agenda, and that's why there's the cluster working review that would in due course bring about much more stability and less problems with reaction to non-recruitment. We're trying to transform schools in terms of CFE, but critically, and this is really critical to this paper, we're trying to bring flexibility and future-proof any decisions that we take around the small school agenda. There is at least one other school in the authority where we've spent a lot of money in the last couple of years, and all of a sudden, not because of predictions with the birth rate or reasonable predictions, all of a sudden, just because of a couple of demographic trends or moves, people have moved away, or 2 or 3 families have decided to move their children, all of a sudden that school might move from having 18 kids to 4. And that could not have been predicted, and we might have spent quite a bit of money on that building. So what we need to do from now on is in the really small school agenda, support small schools in their communities, but build in the flexibility that would mean that money was not, if you like, and I'll use the worst term, wasted, if there was a sudden need to relocate provision away from that town. And the point about this is that we're not signalling that Shawhead would close, in fact, the very opposite. But in establishing a policy of these turnkey modular provisions, if the worst come to the worst, and all of a sudden a school is not viable, we can actually lift and move that school at relatively cheap cost, or elements of that school, and place it onto other places. So we're trying to be imaginative and long-termist about this, and that's the backdrop.
Councillor McClung, did you want to come in on that point?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. That then begs the answer to my question under the last item. If we're future-proofing in case we've got to move it, why are we considering putting turbines there?
I would agree that might not have been the best example to put forward.
Microphone.
Yeah, it's with regard to turbines, these are demountable, if that was the case. But we would seriously consider, we always have to consider, as I mentioned earlier, about the carbon neutrality of schools or any building. So a decision to actually put something actually hasn't been decided yet.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Gilroy and then Councillor Marshall.
Thank you. My initial question was about numbers, but a follow-on to that was also how far are the nearest other primary schools to Shawhead, out of interest, and what size are they? And the other thing is the lifespan of these relocatable buildings. You know, I just wonder how quickly they're going to look tired and shabby. And I notice here that at the present there's no nursery provision in Shorehead. And if you're just having one big room with this new school, that would seem to be a mistake, because if there's an uptake in the in births, there will be toddlers. So I'd have thought you would have needed provision for nursery at Shorehead, and it would indeed be better. But
flexibility has been built into the design. If all of a sudden a big housing scheme arrived at Shorehead, we could actually take the end off and build basically rebuild the school with more and more classrooms. So it's flexible from that point.
yeah, but I'm just thinking, when you start to build a school, I mean, why don't you just think we're going to have a small nursery in here? Because we've got an increase in the birth rate. I mean, you know, children have got to get to 5.
I think the point, Councillor, is that another huge advantage of taking option 5 is that we can build it really, really quickly. So it's not like 4 years until this is up. We're up within a year. So the point is we can make changes very, very quickly to accommodate if there was suddenly a nursery. But there wouldn't suddenly be a nursery. The need for nursery might be 3 or 4 years down the line. The point is to build in the flexibility, add that on if necessary.
Sorry,
But in terms of the timescale, yeah.
With regard to if you look at item 3.9, indicates its design life and its structural life, which is easily compatible with a traditional build.
You'll forgive me if I don't actually believe that. If it's going up in a year, it's going to be moved when it's not needed. I don't think it's of the same, I really don't.
I'll bring in Mr. Foss at this point, and we also have the other 2 schools in the vicinity and their pupil numbers as well, which I think Councillor Gilroy asked.
In terms of the next nearest schools, I think from memory we're going to be looking at Cargan Bridge and Hardgate, who are both at capacity, at the maximum. In terms of the guarantees, the company that we're looking at and we're liaising with this as a project and in negotiations with have a charter that guarantees the statements that are within the document itself. Having also had the opportunity to go and have a look at a like facility, I'm completely sold on how this looks and feels as a school. I suppose in my position, I have the opportunity to visit all the schools in the authority, going from the oldest to the newest. And the one that I've visited down south, I'd be comparing that to anything that we've built ourselves in this authority, if not possibly in places to a higher standard. As a teacher walking into that facility, I would be over the moon with it.
That question, the schools in the locality, I had assumed that schools at Breggles and Lockfoot and Springhome, just wondered what the capacities were there.
I would need to check the data on those schools. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, just initially it was picking up on the capacity for 50 at the school, but taking on board the director's comments with regards to budget challenges, etc. I think what we really do need is an overview and an understanding as a committee where we are, because at the last education committee, I think a lot of us still felt that we were working on the basis that there was going to be a drop and a continuing drop in school roll. And we established that that isn't the case, but we really need to understand where we are. Are we at the bottom of the dip? Are we starting to rise? And I know we can't actually predict the requirements for each school, but we need to actually understand where we are at the moment, where we were probably 5 years ago, and the trending up. And it could be the overall school pupil numbers that we predict, and it will be a rough calculation. But we really need to understand that as an overview in Dumfries and Galloway.
Chair, again, a good comment. I think that we've made statements at various committees about the general trend, and that's been a general statement about there is a big drop coming in secondary role, because when the drop came initially, that's filtered its way through, and over the next 3 or 4 years there will continue to be a drop. There continues to be a drop in primary over a period of time, but actually we have bottomed out and the P1s and P2s are beginning to be bigger than they were. What might be helpful is to get all of that statistical information for the last 5 years and the next 5 years and just get it out to everybody. You know, different members might have different needs and different members may want to look at all the detail or not, but it's totally transparent. So I think it's entirely reasonable if we send that out as an attachment to everybody in this committee to have a look at what all the statistics are.
Follow up, Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, welcome that, and I think apart from actually getting that information out, obviously it's just trending, so we actually need to actually then monitor it on an ongoing basis, whether it's every quarter or every 6 months, to this committee to see, you know what the actual trend is.
Yeah, thank you for that. Do that. Mr. Foster, would you like to come in as well?
Just to add, as well as looking at the birth rate data, we're currently working through looking at school capacities and looking at the catchment area pupils. But to add data and information into that, we're looking at the trends of extraterritorial placing requests to every school. So we're not just focusing on what we know will be the pupils coming up there because they're within the catchment. We're also looking at what magnet schools we have, what number of pupils are electing to go to specific ones. And in terms of looking at whether Shawhead should be 2 classes or 1 classrooms, in reality, the additional cost of the empty space is actually marginal. The biggest cost in any school is the service to areas and the office spaces and the kitchen areas. The classrooms themselves are quite a small fraction of the cost.
Thank you for that. I currently have 5 more speakers. Councillor Witts, followed by Councillor McKee, Carson, Diggle and Wiper.
Thank you, Chair. I'm long enough in the tooth to remember the building that preceded this one, which was a Victorian, long past sell-by date building, which was replaced by this one, and it was trumpeted that this one would at least see me off the face of the earth. Well, it hasn't. I'm still here, and this is on its way out. If my memory serves me right, this one was erected in the 70s, and it concerns me that perhaps, I hope there's not more unpleasant surprises for us in the region, other buildings that were constructed at this time and are perhaps no longer fit for purpose. As far as Terregles is concerned, I have to mention that I can help Councillor Gilroy there. The population of Terregles is 0. It's been that for 30 years because I was the last head teacher there, and it closed in 1980.
Very helpful. My apologies. I actually had Councillor Brodie next, and I had him before, and I'd scored him off. So.
Okay, thank you.
The point about other schools built at this time, are there any unpleasant surprises waiting?
Well, I'll let them give the technical answer, but I know from personal experience looking at many 60s and 70s buildings, it was a time of architectural disaster, I would say. So I'm quite sure there probably is, but as I say, I'll let them give you the technical answers.
As part of our normal capital investment strategy, we look at all schools, and those schools in particular. You will find, for instance, Douglas Ewart. We spent a lot of money in Douglas Ewart, and it's almost a brand new school now. It was built at that particular time. So, and again, the rear section of Annan Academy, done loads of work at that school. That was built at that time. So we have actually been planning all these things, and there are no real surprises yet to come. This is one of the...
Councillor Brodie.
Thanks, Chair. I was going to go in the huff because you'd missed me out, but I'll let you off. I think Lauren sort of covered the point, but I'd like more information. Obviously, the problem at Shawhead, and hopefully it's got a future ahead of it. There's 5 options. The 5th one, a new school modular construction. I think there should have been a 6th option of a smaller modular construction. The proposed new modular school is 456 square metres compared with the present one 426, which was built for a larger school population. And there's also a reduced kitchen space there because it's going to just be a servery now. So What, you say it wouldn't be a much saving, but what sort of saving would there be if there was, say, a third less space in the building?
We would need to look at that in detail and work out what it's costing us per square metre inside the building itself. However, I would add that there is only one teaching space within the facility as its footprint looks just now. The additional space that's being released from potential of it not being a production kitchen, etc., is being allocated into the hall, so it makes it more of a usable community asset, as well as enhancing the space available to the school pupils. We can certainly look at reducing the size of the footprint, coming back with a cost for specifically one classroom and having that at 50 metres squared. However, there is the risk involved in if the roll does go up by 1 or 2 more pupils, then we have to come back and add in another classroom space.
Follow up, Councillor Brodie?
Yeah, just following that, thank you. You mentioned the community space, and you say there's already community space within the village. Right. At the moment, we encourage the community to use the school, but it should also be the other way around, that the school uses community spaces. Could there be a saving on that?
We could certainly investigate that. However, I think it's about the space being in the school for making sure they've got appropriate dining facilities, making sure they've got a GP space they can use and come away from their teaching areas for drama, for art, for PE. They certainly use the hall currently for some of the activities that they do. So, you know, that could be looked into in a wee bit more detail, but I think the core of the school has to remain as it is. The only real saving in there, or flexibility that we could look at, is reducing the teaching space down. However, that's fraught with the risk of the role increasing by a couple of pupils.
Mr Nelson.
With regard to some of the, you indicated that the area was slightly larger. The older school has no plant room and there's no external store. And if you actually find in the document, we're actually looking to build a plant room in there, an external store. And the reason for the plant room is to ensure all the whether it's turbines, but we're actually looking to use air source heat pumps to heat the school. The current school had underfloor heating, which was notoriously bad at failing. Have night stores, which again are not it's a really bad energy user. So we've actually one of the big keys on this is actually our energy management of the school as well.
Okay, Councillor McKee.
Aye, thanks, Chair. Councillor Gilroy raised an issue. I'm just trying to work it out there. The closest, I think Shawhead's got a problem with the closest primary school. It could be Springhome, Dunsker or Cargan Bridge, so that raises its own issues. And I think for people to comment about the additional space that's needed, I think you only need to look at 1 or 2 of the new schools that were built at Lincluden and Cargan Bridge, for example, where they could do almost another 10, 20 pupils in that school if they had the space. So we've been building schools that are far too small, and I think this additional space would be welcomed. And to get something with a 100-year design life, I think Councillor Witts raised the problem, maybe him it close to Tregor School, I'm not sure. But we're building schools, or we've built schools in the past that have lasted 30, 40 years. And to be honest with you, when you see some of the new ones, I don't think they'll last much longer. And I think some councillors here might be lucky in that they'll not need to worry about it, because they'll not be here. But so we need to look and see that we're getting better value for money with buildings and what have you. And I would hope that what you're proposing here is going to last that length of time, although I'm certainly well out of it and I wouldn't worry about that. But we need to be designing things that's going to last for a length of time and no building just for the next 30 years. We've got to be a bit realistic. Obviously, I hope it's not a flat roof you're looking at either. But that's my comments. And I think, as I say, Shawhead's in a difficult position in that it's miles from anywhere. And really, we haven't much option but to rebuild.
I think many members would echo your comments, and I think officers would probably agree with many of the comments as well. And certainly the capacity has been an issue in many of the new schools that we've built, and we're aware of that. So maybe we're finally doing what we should be doing. Councillor Carson.
Thanks, Chair. There is another primary school, Lochfoot, or Lochrutton's actually probably the closest. My concern is we're sitting here as an education committee looking at buildings and what we think buildings should be and whether they're good value for money. What isn't included in this report is the knock-on effect to the likes of Lochrutton or other schools in the area. I know certainly I've had some ward members or people from Lochfoot concerned about what the knock-on effect would be in their primary school. What we should maybe look at, and I know we've got a policy of not closing schools, but as councillors we've also got a responsibility for value for money, as Councillor McKee said. We've just gone ahead with the presumption that there should be no decision to close this. I'm not convinced about the school role, but investing the sort of money we're talking about with a less than healthy school role, we will maybe be sitting here in a few years' time wondering why on earth we made the decision to spend as much money without actually looking at the knock-on effects or the benefits there might be for other primary schools in the vicinity. So I just wanted to ask the question whether the effect of a new primary school at Shawhead, what would it have in the likes of Lochrutton? Also, kind of banging on about press releases and things, what isn't good, again, is that the people in Shawhead believe they're going to get a new school. Because back in October, the headlines in the paper was Shawhead set to get a new primary school within the next year. I know nobody actually came out and said that was going to happen, but it was highlighted as one of the options and brought to the forefront with the other options sort of put in the back. So again, it's not very helpful or very easy for us to sit here when most of the people in Shawhead presume they're getting a new school anyway.
Director.
Yeah, I think it would be certainly true to say that officers don't write newspaper headlines, and we have over a number of years sometimes suffered from headlines that can be a wee bit misleading and unhelpful. The issue, I really need to nail this point because it's the point that you raised again. If this council at some stage in the future decided to have a school closure policy, we need to try to make sure that any money that's spent in between now and then is not wasted. And this is the key point that we're making here about this provision. This provision could be moved, parts of it could be moved to support and extend other parts of schools that we've got, if necessary. If I would really say to you that given the challenges that are around, and given that other authorities don't have the same challenges as us quite often, other authorities that might have far less but bigger schools overall and don't have the same geographical issue that we have, might find that parental choice, where suddenly there's a trend where a group of parents decide to move their kids or start going to somewhere that you weren't expecting, that's usually cushioned by the fact it's already quite big schools. So losing 5 or 6 or 10 kids doesn't make that much difference. We've got 123 schools still, many of them 40% with less than 50 children. That's the reality of the region. And therefore, we're very susceptible to trends and changes in terms of what parental choice looks like. And it's absolutely critical that we begin to build in flexibility. This is a one-off in a sense, in that we will very quickly be able to review whether it was put in time, whether it was put in at cost, and whether the teachers and the kids are getting value for money, and whether it is flexible. And I would suggest to you that it is an ideal opportunity to look at that, review it very quickly. Potentially, it's a long-term way of looking at how we develop provision across the authority when other situations arise like this. But it's precisely the flexibility that's crucial.
Thank you for that. Councillor Diggle.
Thank you, Chair. If we go with options 3, 4 or 5, can I please ask that the head teachers are involved in the planning and the design process? I say this because we've got 2 fantastic schools at Beatock and Moffat, and but when talking to the head teachers, they haven't necessarily always got exactly what they wanted, and they could have done with a very small amount of cost.
Yeah, that was taken on board. I think we've learnt a lot through previous design and builds and such like to consult much more inclusively with the entire community and the school community, so that will definitely be taken on board. I have Councillor Wiper and then Councillor Nicholson and then a second speaker, Councillor McClung, and then I would hope to move to recommendations.
Thank you, Chair. It was really about the scoring system, which was mentioned at the beginning of this. I just wonder if this school, am I correct, it was 45 on the list? Yeah. Is there a flaw in the system when it is actually putting something that's down at 45 and then it all of a sudden jumps right up to the very top? Because if my local school was, say, sitting at 1 or 2 in that list and I was expecting it to get refurbished or rebuilt in the very near future, and then all of a sudden another school from away down the bottom jumps to the top of that list, I just wonder if there's actually a flaw in the way that scoring is done.
Well, again, if I could try and explain that again, previously the priority order, and bear in mind that it's only really in the last 2 or 3 years that we've developed a really robust scoring system, and one that members were very aware of in terms of being able to see a list. You know, even I think as when I started as director 5 or 6 years ago, it wasn't always absolutely clear why something was rising to the top. We've now got a list that's ordered. The difficulty we had, Councillor, was that if you purely based it on condition, then we would be spending £1 million every year, possibly on a lot of the smaller schools. Now, whilst that might have been fair in terms of the buildings, you might have spent 10 million on 10 wee schools, which might have benefited 100 kids overall, whereas we had to try to take account of the fact that when we invest in bigger schools with lots more children benefit. So we try to build in a factor which says that whilst our small schools need to be maintained and supported, we need to recognise that investment ratio against the number of pupils there is a significant factor, and that was what we brought in, and that was why some of the bigger schools went further up the agenda. The difficulty with Shawhead, when you take everything into account, it comes out at 45, but purely on the condition of the roof, we have just got no choice but to invest some money in it. So that's the background to that. I mean, it's not impossible at a later stage to revisit how that ordering works, but it's quite complex, it's quite challenging, but that was the thinking behind it.
Okay, Councillor Nicholson and then Councillor McClung.
Thank you. I mean, there's been concerns raised about, I think it was Councillor Carson saying about the impact on other smaller schools, and I think it's trying to get your head round something that has an impact on all the schools. You know, we've got a table here, and we've heard questions about the table and the reasons why we do something or we don't do something. And I still find it difficult, why we can spend £1.3 million on 16 kids, and that's basically what it comes down to. Whereas who's 45 in the list, and Laurie now, for example, is number 9 with 319 pupils who'd love that kind of money spent in it. Mr. Grant says that it needs something done in the roof. What would be the actual cost for to repair the roof? To up to a standard, for example, would it be that type of money for the children? And again, Councillor Lever was saying about the 16 children in that unit. Now that would, to bring it up to a classroom for 25, that would be an increase of more than 50% of the pupils there. For classroom, and I understand about a smaller unit. And you're saying it's not a great savings, but it would be interesting. It would have been better to have them figures here, and the types of figures I'm asking for about the cost for the roofs and the cost of a smaller unit. And which it's fine saying these porta cabins can get moved to other schools if they're not, if things go wrong with the area they're put in. But there's an actual cost to that as well. So what would the cost be to actually move these porta cabins? And what would be the cost to get a smaller porta cabin instead of a big one for £1.3 million?
Thank you for that, Councillor Nicholson. I think on page 24 of the 78 at 3.6.3 option 2, it highlights the cost of roof refit and making it safe, secure, wind and watertight. And I think that's the cost of 723. Do you want to add anything to any of the other questions?
Sorry, it was additional costs on top of that. Would there be any additional costs? Sorry, I didn't make myself clear.
Mr. Nelson.
You indicated, purely as a scenario, if we were to relocate this school, it would cost approximately £200,000 to move that school to another location. it seems like a lot of money, but if you were to build a school in another place, similar cost, it would be 1.3 million pounds. So theoretically, each time you move it, you would actually theoretically save £1 million.
And I think, Chair, if I could add, and I think, again, I totally understand all of the issues that are being raised here, and we spent an awful lot of time thinking about this. The biggest single worry we had in some ways when we started off this process was the thought that we're going to have to spend 723,000 on making it wind and watertight, not even improving it dramatically, with no flexibility in the future when we don't know what will happen in the future. So it's not as if we could have just done a £50,000 repair. It's 720 for 16 kids on something that's completely stuck. And that's to us the attraction of the flexibility. And again, I think the £200,000 to move it at a later stage potentially allows you in some other village or somewhere else where you really need a brand new facility to do it at really cheap options. So, you know, that's some of the thinking that went behind the recommendation.
Councillor McClung, sorry, Councillor Nicholson.
Yes, I know that, I know that some of the arguments behind all this, the flexibility argument and all that type of thing. But, there's other schools within the region that would like that type of flexibility as well. And it's trying to get the understanding of why we spend £1.3 million on 16 kids, whereas you might spend another £500,000 in Lockfoot, which we could expand and, take in these kids. So it's not, and there are community facilities within that area. So, it's trying to get a balance and how we're going to make a decision that's best value for money for the whole region.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. I agree entirely with the sentiment that you've just said. However, as an authority, as you're well aware, and as an education committee, we have a policy which has a presumption against closure of any of our rural schools. We've committed to keeping them all open. We've committed to those communities that we will not be closing their schools. And aside from that, we wouldn't get permission from the Scottish Government to do so anyway. So on the basis of that, moving to Lockfoot is simply not an option. It's not an option we can look at unless we decide to change our entire policy. And on the basis of that, we have to accept that what's in front of us is the best value we can get going forward into the future with some flexibility. I have one final speaker, Councillor McClung.
Yeah, thanks for letting me back in, Chair. It was in connection with the answer to Councillor Witz's questions regarding unpleasant surprises. I have a school in my ward that looks very, very similar to the picture of Shaw Head, and the staff there would say that at least 3 of the points that are listed under the current condition of Shaw Head School at 3.5.2 would relate to that school as well.
Mr. Nelson.
I'm assuming the school is in the Drumore area. One of the reasons for doing what we're doing as well is to consider a similar solution there. Recently we looked at planned preventive maintenance to that school, but the windows and panels were so bad we couldn't actually do that. Couldn't actually apply more sticky plasters to it, and you might find that information will come back to this committee relatively soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, members. If I have no further members, we'll move to the recommendations. I think we've had a good debate on it. I think we're in a very difficult situation that we do have to make some form of investment in Shaw Head, and certainly looking at the options in front of us, I would be quite happy to move the recommendations as are, if any other members are minded. So if we're happy to move the recommendations as are and allow you to get on with this particular project in full consultation with the community and in full consultation with the head teacher. And just to further add that we did ask for information on trends on increase and decreases in birth rates and pupil numbers, and that will be presumably emailed out to members. Is that okay? Happy to accept the recommendations? Okay. We've been asked to accept the recommendations. Thank you very much, Councillor Nicholl. Mr. Nelson, Mr. Forrest, could you hang about for a little bit longer? The item 8, the Corporate Change Fund bid for the autism strategy, I feel that some members may want some clarification on any future capital investment in relation to that, but you can go and have a quick coffee while we do the next report. Thank you very much. Sorry, Councillor McKee? I would love a coffee, I know. Okay. Okay, moving on to item 7, which is a report asked for by members as a further report to one that we had previously, where we felt there wasn't quite enough statistical information on music tuition. This has been slightly superseded by the budget's decision to stop charging for music instruction in schools, and hopefully on the back of that we will begin to see an uptake in the number of people taking music tuition again. We have Alan Cameron here, who will, I'm sure, be happy to answer any questions on the report, but with that we have a report in front of us and I will open the floor to members. Councillor Carson?
Just thank you very much. The report's very useful. I found it very difficult to interpret, actually. The way the figures are laid out, it's not particularly helpful. I think the trend, the most important thing is that we saw a downward trend in the uptake of music tuition, both for SQA pupils and otherwise, and hopefully the decision taken in the budget to remove music tuition, we'll see that trend dramatically turn round. Sorry. Yep. The removal of the tuition charges or fees will see a turnaround in the uptake. One question I did have on the back of that, is there any plans for the Education Authority to actually work more in partnership with local bands and whatever? I know in the past we've discussed about pipe bands and silver bands or whatever. At the moment, the only partnership you have is with the National Youth Choir, which unfortunately, as far as I believe, is actually the Wigtonshire side of it actually is no longer. But do you have any plans to work closer with bands in the area, which would hopefully also see a higher uptake?
First of all, Councillor, I do apologise for the slightly confused presentation of some of the figures. Some of the graphs would be better looked at landscape than A4, and some of the printing has exacerbated that. We have duplicated information. It's all accurate. I would point you to, we tried to give as much different types of information, and some people might have had a pick and mix approach to what you would want to look at. We wanted to give information specifically for councillors to see their local schools, to see exactly how many young people were taking instrumental instruction, how many eligible pupils in, for example, P6 and 7 for primary. Eligible pupils refers to the P6-7 cohort in primary schools, and eligible pupils in relation to secondary is all of them. I had a wee note that, for example, to give you one little statistic, there's 29 of our primary schools who have an over 20% uptake. However, there was 28 primaries who had under 10% uptake. And we very much want to look at focusing on the schools where that is the case. Just before I come on to the question in relation to the bands, can I just say that the instrumental service staff do take the responsibility very seriously now that we have this great opportunity to give free access to young people across Dumfries and Galloway. And this week, for example, teams of our instructors are going into schools to work with young people in what we call roadshows. And just this morning, some may have noted that Laurie Now, for example, has a very low or negligible uptake. However, there are 205 young folks who are getting a presentation this very morning with our instrumental service folks. And in Calside, which was also a very low uptake, Calside this afternoon will be having, in partnership with Georgetown, a presentation from our instrumental service staff. So it's just to say that right now there's an action plan rolling into place to give youngsters as many opportunities to sign up for next session. In answer to the question in relation to the local bands, historically across Dumfries and Galloway, as we will know, there's many excellent provisions through, for example, the Langham Town Band right across to the Silver Band in Creetown. And we have engaged at different times with those folks. Sometimes, historically, in families, young folks go into those bands and don't come through necessarily the instrumental service. So it's like an additional extra provision. We have met with these groups and we have spoken with them, and sometimes they've felt that maybe they're taking away customers from our instrumental service. But we've always had friendly relationships with them. We do also encourage the young people who uptake instrumental service lessons within the schools to join the local bands. So we do encourage them to do that. But in terms of a working partnership, that is an area of challenge and an area for consideration. But we're always open to looking to work with partners. And can I just say in relation to your comment about NICOS in Wigtonshire, through our Youth Music Initiative, we've actually managed to start 2 new choirs, one in Newton Stewart and one in Stranraer, and we've named them the Machars and the Rins choirs. And those choirs in totality have more members now than the NICOS existing choir in Newton Stewart had last year. So we're very pleased with that development.
Thank you for that. Follow-up, Councillor Carson?
Yeah, I welcome that. That's fantastic news. I also meant to say that, just pass on my congratulations to the concert that I know you had a big role in at the Easterbrook Hall before Christmas. The response of parents and visitors coming out of that was tremendous. They were overwhelmed with the quality and the enthusiasm there was. So congratulations to you and your team for that.
Absolutely. Councillor Gilroy?
Thank you. It was about the eligibility because I couldn't understand the primary school side of it. So thank you for clearing that up. But there is quite a number of schools, if you look just down, that have got less than 10% of their children taking part in. And I just wondered if we should have a target in our KPI somewhere along the line to see if we can do something about it, or whether that is just not feasible at all. But I just would be interested what your thoughts were on that. I'm not really proposing it.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Gilroy. At the end of the day, there will be capacity issues in relation to serving 123 schools across a geographic space of over 100 miles wide from Drumore to Moffat. However, and there are 1 or 2 anomalies. For example, if I look at the first one, Amesfield, there's only 1 youngster uptaking. If we change that to 2, then we would meet that goal. So because many of the schools are such small numbers, the figures can either be skewed or the percentages maybe don't mean as much as they might. What we would be looking to do across the region is to have, certainly on a cluster basis, a degree of equity of uptake. And so I think what we will be looking at are the clusters generally where there is a lower uptake than where there's a higher uptake. I could identify immediately that Douglas Ewart, Sanker, and unusually and strangely St Joseph's College are the 3 schools which in the secondary sector are under 10%. However, I would say that St Joseph's College, having 60 youngsters with lessons, many youngsters in St Joseph's College will also have private lessons in the town. So the musical life of St Joseph's, albeit it says 8%, is actually a very positive experience for many kids.
Thank you for that. I have Councillor Marshall and then Councillor Dempster.
Thanks, Chair. First of all, probably just thank Alan for a very comprehensive report, and also I think it kind of bears out that there is probably an excellent and extensive range of instruments being taught across Dumfries and Galloway. But again, I'll come back to a point I raised at an earlier meeting and concentrating on one of the only kind of Scottish traditional instruments, which is the bagpipes. You're absolutely right. I think the downturn over the last couple of years has been due to cost. But another issue which hopefully will be addressed now is because that we weren't able to actually provide a fair kind of provision of certain musical instruments across the region. And hopefully, I heard you say that you're trying to look at that equity, and I welcome that. But we're very lucky as well that we do have a lot of our teaching staff that have the requisite skills to teach people within that. But I think from previous reports, it did highlight that there is a large uptake around about Thornhill, Stranraer, and that's because we only have really 2 bagpipe tutors. So I'd like to actually some concentration on trying to get into the other areas, because there probably is demand there. We've got a long and proud tradition with all the bands in Dumfries and Galloway, and I'd like to see us address that so we can offer bagpipe tuition to more of our pupils. And you will be aware that some of our pupils do take them through qualifications at the moment. a requirement is to play Pembroke, and at the moment we can only provide that from Skype. And I know it's because there's a problem with getting those tunes coming forward in Dumfries and Galloway. But I just would like to, we have an opportunity now to kind of redress the kind of balance across Dumfries and Galloway, and there's certain areas, particularly in my area, in Arndale and Eskdale, where we need to focus on trying to get a tutor in there to learn the bagpipes to the pupils.
Yes, I'm very aware that some folks, including yourself, feel strongly that the pipes should be better represented in Dumfries and Galloway. That is certainly an area that we can look at. If I can talk broadly about traditional music education in Dumfries and Galloway for this coming year, I had a meeting yesterday with Creative Scotland. Miraculously managed to drive from Dumfries up through Sanquhar on white roads all the way to a meeting in Irvine with Creative Scotland, who were meeting several councils. And they were recognising the work that Dumfries and Galloway was doing in a range of ways. We're going to be working in all our primary schools next year with 12 weeks of provision in traditional music provided by an organisation called Fèis Ross. The Fèis, you may be aware from Highland region, is an organisation which provides an opportunity for young people to be involved in traditional music opportunities. And we've been doing that in around 40 schools this year. Next session, we will be doing it in 103 primaries, is it we've got, 104? We'll be doing it in every single primary school. So youngsters will be getting two choices of like accordion or singing or a bit of fiddle or different traditional music opportunities. The direct question in relation to bagpipe tuition is one more of logistics in terms of the existing staff that we've got. For us to employ a bagpipe tutor, which would be great if we could do that, would mean that the next person who was to naturally leave our service, we would have to make a decision to say, well, we're not going to replace that woodwind teacher with another woodwind teacher, but we would replace that teacher with a bagpipe tutor. And you're absolutely right. I would imagine that if that person offered their services to schools, then there would be no doubt good uptake. Very fortunately, in Dumfries, we have different pipe bands where youngsters do get access, the Corbury Pipers, and in Annan there's different town bands. It's very difficult to run an instrumental service directly in partnership with outside providers when we have a clear remit, I suppose. I don't know how well that answers the question. It's just to say that traditional music next year is going to be a major focus for all our primary schools.
Follow up, Councillor Marshall.
Back with Alan, because I mentioned right at the end there about working in partnership with the local band, etc. And it's the very reason that I've had a number of representations from bands saying that because there isn't the adequate provision within the schools, they're finding it more and more of a pressure trying to accommodate all the children that want to learn the bagpipes. So that's, the issue has kind of raised itself. The bands try to help, but they feel that there's not enough being done in the schools at the moment. And so they're having to actually pick up most of the tuition.
Thank you. I'm sure Mr Cameron's taken that on board. I have four more members, Councillor Dempster, Lever, McKee and McClung.
Thanks, Chair. I think all the points have been covered, but I'd want to rehearse them again, just for my peace of mind. And the first one is the point about Sanquhar being less than 10%. It's one of these issues again about deprivation, where kids from Kirkconnell, Killaloe, poor areas can't pay for tuition. And it's scandalous that we get ourselves into a situation where kids can't develop their talents because of financial constraints. So I'm delighted that that particular barrier has been removed. That's welcomed, and I hope we see a large uptake on tuition now. I would be keen to see, and I hope members will agree, and I know it will take some time, but nevertheless I'd like to see a list of what instrument tuition is offered in all schools or provided, because there's a clear differential across the board, and it's something we'll not be able to address unless we can actually see the issues. And I'll give you just a wee anecdote. I go to the Sanquhar Academy Prize given every year, and we normally get a couple of kids playing a fiddle, and then the Upper Nithsdale Youth Pipe Band is presented, and they play brilliant music, but they're not taught at the school, and yet it's presented as a talent in the school, and I think that's a shame. And that brings me to my last point. I think we should be saying to the school, We've got Sankaran District Silver Band that are now encouraged to go to the school. They should be absolutely embraced, and we should try and get kids to pick up instruments and silver band instruments so that they have somewhere to progress to develop their skills, to showcase them in a general public arena instead of being confined to the school. And we should also be engaging with the Upper Nissdale Pipe Band. There are 3 pipe bands in Upper Nissdale, and it's a shame that Pipe and Stoughton Thornhill and no in Sanka. And it's these disparities I want to see addressed. And whilst I can understand that if we only have a tutor for fiddle music, then that's the only tuition we can offer. But when there's an opportunity for kids to develop their talents elsewhere, we need to move with the times. We need to try and develop these skills. And it may be engaging with a silver band and getting them into the school and getting a working relationship. Because I see in your report, I think it's Angus, where schools provide children for other external organisations and see their personal development progress right through from primary to adulthood. And that's what should be happening. It should be a progression. We should be facilitating it, not saying to kids, you're going to play a fiddle or no play a fiddle, because that's what there is in Sanka. That shouldn't happen. And I would hope that we would see a report on what's been offered where and developing. And I would hope we would take a conscious decision to work with organisations and make that part of our council's policy. Because with the proper disclosures, etc., there's no reason why we can't work hand in glove with organisations for the benefit, and that's the key word, for the pupils.
Thank you very much for those comments. I'm going to bring in the other 3 members, and then if there's any other issues that can be picked up by Mr Cameron at the end, that would be great. I have Councillor Lever, Councillor McKee, and then Councillor McClung.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to echo my thanks for Mr Cameron to bring forward such a good report. And the only criticism I would say is I think it would have been better if we had this before the budget setting meeting, so we'd have the evidence in which to base it. But having said that, in the spirit of generosity, I'd like to congratulate the administration for taking on board the Labour Group's proposal to remove charging altogether for instrument tuition, rather than merely just reducing it as they proposed to do in December. So well done, the administration. Have that recorded. And I wonder if, in terms of uptake, whether the P6, P7 eligibility is too restrictive. I mean, I noticed in some of these schools, there may be only 1 pupil. Have we got any flexibility in terms of that? I mean, if a child's got a real interest in learning a musical instrument, it's probably going to show earlier in their school career than at P6 and P7. So is there any flexibility in there if there's capacity and the child desperately wants to learn an instrument?
I think if I bring in the other members, and then you can pick up on all the questions towards the end, but thank you very much for the group hug, that's much appreciated. Councillor McKee.
Hi, Chair. I've noticed there's 2 or 3 primary schools missing. I take it that they've got no musical tuition going on in these schools.
And finally, Councillor McClung.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's under 3.3. Says that we work in partnership with the National Youth Choir of Scotland. What partnerships have we got in the west of the region, considering the National Youth Choir closed the Galloway Choir last year?
I think you'd left the room when we were given that answer earlier on. maybe Councillor Carson would fill you in.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think with...
Before you leave it, can we have a report at some stage on how we might integrate or liaise with community bands to better develop skills and relationships between the school and the bands? Because I think it's important, and it's just been sort of left hanging there, and I'd like to see some report outlining what bands exist, who would want to engage with us, and how we might develop that arrangement.
Yeah. Councillor Dempster, we were just going to pick up on those points. I think Mr Cameron had a point from Councillor Lever to pick up on before we go to the recommendation.
In relation to the partnership with the bands, many years ago, I met with the former deputy of, his name escapes me, he was formerly the deputy head teacher in Douglas Ewart, who is also very active in Freetown Silver Band. Someone here might know who he is. Mr McNabb, that's right, Stuart McNabb. So I have engaged with folks like Mr McNabb when Mr McNabb has said, can we go into the secondary school and talk to the youngsters and arrange some lessons And controversially, and without permissions as such, years ago I agreed that this would be absolutely fine. If he wished to do this, then if it suited the school and the head teacher was happy, if he's in the local community and he's offering that service, why not? Because if they're not taking the opportunity through the instrumental service and they're going to take it up through a community opportunity, then why not? So in an ongoing way, that is a discussion that I would have. And at the end of the day, it's down to secondary schools and indeed primary schools to foster local arrangements and to foster partnerships, friendships, folks coming in. And it doesn't necessarily need the instrumental services permission, although it makes life easier if we know about it. But I will take on board the comment in relation to partnership with groups, and we can look at how we might maybe more formalise arrangements. We can certainly look at that. In relation to the point to do with having youngsters at an earlier stage than P6 entering the instrumental service, the reason, my understanding is that the reason we had a P6 to S6 provision was capacity issues, because not so long ago we had over 2,000 young people engaged in instrumental service, and the instrumental service was indeed stretched by capacity. And if that had been further extended to P4 or 5 youngsters, then it may well be that the provision could not have coherently held together across Dumfries and Galloway. That's not to say that we couldn't look at it again, bearing in mind the uptake that we do get. I'm hoping and expecting that the uptake this coming year will be significantly greater than it is just now. However, if for any reason it wasn't as encouraging as it could be, I can see no reason why we couldn't offer it to P5 stage. One of the points about instrumental tuition and development for kids is, if you're going to play a string instrument, it's actually better you start learning a string instrument from the age of 7 or 8 for a brass instrument, because you need more puff. It's normally appropriate that you wouldn't start till certainly the age of 9 or 10 or 11. And so certain instruments lend themselves to better starting at different times. So there's issues around that, there's issues around capacity, but we'll take on board these comments and give that some serious consideration. In relation to the question about Sanker, we have put video conference kit. I know I've mentioned that in the past, and one of the particular purposes of video conference kit in places like Sanker is to increase the variety that we can offer. I arranged with Annan Academy, actually, for a pupil in S6 who required, was it yourself, sir, that talked about Pibroch? Sean has gone, mentioned Pibroch, which is a particular skill at advanced higher level. And I arranged with the Glasgow Piping Centre for a Skype lesson for that individual pupil for the Glasgow Piping Centre to deliver that direct to the child. So when we're faced with specific issues of supporting youngsters' specific needs, then we can look at doing specific things like that. I'd love to employ more staff, more bagpipe tutors, but clearly with 16 clusters around the region, even if we were to employ another bagpipe tutor, we could only service maybe 2 or 3 additional clusters over 16. So there's issues around capacity, and we're constantly looking to maximise opportunity for kids and choice for kids. In relation to the choice that youngsters are going to get, we've just put out this leaflet this is just a flyer for primary kids who are getting demonstrations all over the region yesterday, today, tomorrow, from our instrumental staff, and all the youngsters are getting these flyers, encouraging them, and this says that provision is now a free opportunity. So that's a very updated piece of work. Very soon, and in closing, Chair, very soon, all P5, 6 and 7 youngsters will get a leaflet home to their parents, and that will be offering the full range of woodwind, brass, guitar, strings. It will mention pipes and drum kit, percussion. It's the full range of orchestral instruments, and these are all offered. And we are one of the very few councils in Scotland that do not audition young people. If they want to do it, they will get the opportunity to do it. And that's how we operate as an equitable approach. So hopefully that's answered most of things.
Thank you very much for that, Mr Cameron. And I know that you're very passionate about the service and that you're doing a lot of work with the schools and with the wider community to enhance the instrumental instruction service, which I hope will incorporate all the points that Councillor Dempster has made. I'm not going to let you back in because we've got another 2 reports to go. If you want to speak to Mr Cameron very specifically about something out with committee, I think we should move to the recommendations at this point.
It was part of the recommendation the Chair was going to speak about. What I did ask was if Mr Cameron would be kind enough at some stage to provide a list of what tuition is offered at the school, and that hasn't been covered.
No,
and I would want to see that in all schools, please.
Now, as we move to the recommendations, we have 2 recommendations. We've also, as members have mentioned, asked for some informational data on the range of instrumental choices in the specific schools across the region, and I think that that would be very easily collated and could probably just be emailed out to members. It wouldn't need to form a future report. I mean, I could tell you what's going on at Lockerbie Academy. So,
Sorry, can I just say, to save work on that, I would reiterate that all instruments on our instrumental brochure are offered to young people. And so any child who wants to do a woodwind, a brass, all the range of instruments, including bassoon, oboe, you name it, we will endeavour to give them that opportunity, whether it be with a tutor directly or over a video conference session.
I think that's fine. Again, I think maybe even if members got an email copy of the music instruction forms, they can see the process that parents go through and the choices that people have, because my understanding is that it was almost a needs-led service. If somebody asked for a specific instrument, there was endeavours to make sure that a tutor got there to teach that particular instrument. So that might be. Anyway, moving to the recommendations, members are asked to note 2.1 and 2.2. Are we happy to do so? Thank you very much. Okay, moving on. Thank you very much, Mr Cameron. Keep up the good work. Moving on to item 8, I'll just wait for Peter Nelson and Lauren Foss to come back through. Do members want a 5-minute comfort break? No, that's fine, just asking.
Chair, just on that, while we're waiting, you know, I can't understand why we're having this meeting this morning and there's another major committee this afternoon. I know this is an extra meeting, but I don't know why it was programmed in, because we have a policy that we don't have the 2 major committees. I'm just finished my question.
Because it's on Valentine's Day as well, so I'm not being wined and dined at the moment in Paris. So no. When we decided to make the budget meeting in January, or decided that the January meeting was to be a budget meeting, we had a couple of fairly substantial reports that needed to go to the January meeting as well. But we didn't want to, most of these reports were meant to be in January also. We didn't want to give the members too long an agenda when we had the budget to discuss and very other very important matters. So I requested after full council in December that could another date be looked at. At that time, February the 14th, as I remember it, was completely free. Education, put ourselves in the diary for 10:30. I can't speak for PH&E, but as far as I was concerned, we were the only meeting on this, you know, today. PH&E have obviously had to schedule an extra meeting, but that's not my issue as Chair of Education. Okay, moving on to item 8, Corporate Change Fund bid, Autism Strategy. We have Stuart Bigger, who is here to answer any questions on the report, and if any capital or investment issues come up, I'll ask Mr Nelson and Mr Foss. This report's in front of us. It has been to Policy and Resources Committee, and Councillor Smith quite rightly flagged up that it had never been to Education. And the normal process is that the Service Committee would see the Change Fund bid and then put in a bid to the Corporate Policy and Resources Committee. For some reason, it was the other way round, and so Councillor Smith quite rightly flagged that up, which is why it's in front of us. Stuart Bigger, do you have anything further to add to the report?
I would hope that the background paper to the report gives members sufficient information to form a view about what is proposed. It's based on obviously the production by the Scottish Government of the Autism Strategy for Scotland and attempts to put in place some of the recommendations from that strategy.
Thank you very much. I'll open the floor to members. Councillor Gilroy.
Yes, I'm looking at 3.4, and I'm just wondering, you talk about establishing two support bases within existing mainstream schools. I'm just wondering where you're anticipating those to be, and also a residential school for 6 children or young people. And I'm just wondering where exactly the new build, or have you got a building in thought?
In terms of the support bases, we have a system of learning centres in mainstream schools, as you know, across the authority for children, mostly with moderate learning difficulties. But over the years, they have come to be more and more populated with children with autism difficulties as well. Both of those kinds of difficulties need provision, but often the kinds of support that the two groups of children need is quite different, and the mix doesn't always work terribly well. It comes to a head at certain points in certain schools, and Dunrar Academy experienced a particular difficulty a couple of years ago, and that's when really this idea began to be conceived. So the proposal would be to have a support base in the west and one in the east, and hopefully site a residential provision somewhere central, which could provide additional support.
So at this moment, you haven't identified the mainstream school or the area for a residential?
The proposal involves identifying a project manager to take forward negotiation with teachers and schools about where they might be, where the need is. And you'll note also in 5.1.1 there's an emphasis upon a training need. And the building of capacity at universal service, the building of capacity in universal services would be another task that could be taken forward by that project manager delivering training, organizing training within mainstream schools to help them to be more resilient in terms of children.
It's about the transition from being classed as a child to being then classed as an adult. How does that work in the various, and that's from 18 to when you get to 18?
Transition for people with autism has been a major problem, it has to be said. We feel that in terms of children and young people, both social work, education, and other community systems work quite well. The provision for adults is much less well developed, and I know a lot of parents experience a lot of anxiety at the time their children and young people move out of the school system. You'll see elsewhere in the report there is a recommendation through the Joint Commissioning Managers of Health and Social Work to develop adult residential provision locally. And I think that is part of a plan to develop non-residential provision for young adults with autism also. We hope we can build better transition links through the development of services.
Thank you for that. Councillor Lever.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is something which has been long overdue. You know, we've been going on about this for years. It's the 5.5, 6 years I've been on the council. What we need to do is to satisfy the needs of children and adults within the region wherever possible, obviously without any loss of the quality of the service that they get. And I wonder, fully supportive of this, because the money is being spent locally within the area. It's actually providing employment down here as well as ensuring that children don't have to leave the area in order to get the service. I wonder whether we're going far enough in terms of this. I know we've got walk before we can run, but on page 63, in 3.3, it says that 7 places have been, or 7 potential places, 7 potential recipients have been identified for the 4 adult placements. So there's obviously an additional need within there. So why aren't we providing 7 places if we know that there are 7 people who need it? Because autism is something which is on the increase, or the diagnosis of autism is on the increase. So it's likely that the demand is going to increase in the future rather than decrease. So are we actually making as much provision as we should do, given how long it's taken us to get to this stage?
I regret I'm not qualified to speak on behalf of adult services. But I agree. I think this is an issue which we need to address quite seriously and in a strategic way.
Councillor McKee.
Aye, thanks, Chair. Just reading paragraph 6.2.4, it talks about equipping a 6th-place residential school, which contradicts what Councillor Reader just said. And just the main point of view is, I was surprised to see that the majority of these youngsters are looked after children, because that causes its own problems as well. I think, as Councillor Lever says, we're fully in support of this, and what we've got to ensure is that it's top quality support that these youngsters are going to get. I notice you say in your papers that there's a school you're using at the present moment which is costing a fair sum of money, and you're not necessarily happy with the quality of support they're always getting. I think it's important these youngsters get all the support they need. And when they come to adulthood, obviously that's another issue, as Councillor Gilroy has already raised. But just if you could clarify why one place is saying 4th place and another place is saying 6th place residential schools, that would be helpful, please.
I think, Councillor, that the 4th-place residential unit that's being conceived is for adults returning from out-of-region placement. The 6 places that's proposed in this paper are for children who are either at risk of going to residential school or are already in residential schools like
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Brodie and then Councillor McComb.
Chair, yeah, just a question. Page 61, foot that says in September there were 147 children awaiting assessment and diagnostic decision. That's quite a backlog, is it? Then what is the progress on that? And the second question I've got is that you're projecting a £200,000 saving per year on the provision. How robust are these figures, given the fact that working with children with autism is quite an intensive staffing one to ensure the safety of young children and the staff?
On the first question, the Communication Disorders Assessment Team is composed of a number of professional services in health and education and social work. There are 147 children, as you say, in the process of assessment. This process can take several months. There is communication with the parents and with the schools during that process. It's not that there's a backlog so much, it's that the process takes a period of time in each case. And I'm sorry, I've forgotten your second question.
The robustness of your savings figure of £200,000.
I think we would have to accept that there has to be some margin. We know through conversations with the staff in New Struan School, for example, that there are other services that they would benefit from, that they are exploring offering weekend provision for children, and that would significantly increase their costs. But these figures are based on the staffing levels that they provide. We know we have, we can train staff to the same levels as their staff. And I think the figures are robust in that sense.
Okay, I have 2 more speakers. Sorry, 1 more speaker, Councillor McComb, and then I'll maybe allow Councillor Carson if the point hasn't been made by then.
Thanks, Chair. I note Dr. Bigger referred to the learning centres in mainstream schools as dealing with pupils with moderate learning difficulties. I think we have to accept that on occasion They have dealt with much more serious learning difficulties than that. Pupils who have very, very limited vocabularies, pupils who have difficulty articulating words. That, to me, is far more than moderate learning difficulties.
I accept that correction.
Councillor Carson.
I'll try to be very brief. Two brief points. Does this go far enough? You know, we're pushing now for early diagnosis and preferably early intervention to help these children. Does the money you're looking for actually go far enough? That's just a straightforward question. The other thing is, do your figures take into consideration any parents who actually decide to take their children out of the council schemes, if you like, and they're placed in other residential homes out with? And has that been addressed in your budgets?
It's correct that the additional support legislation grants parents the right to seek to do that. There are a number of children who are placed in residential school at the direct request of their parents and procedures. That's not true in every case by all means. And we're confident that we could persuade and convince parents that their children would be well educated locally.
Thanks, Chair. If I could just add one thing about does it go far enough? I think the point of this bid, and that's why it's going to the Change Fund, is precisely about the development of the process and the development of what might come from this. At the moment, figures are indicative, but in order to develop that sort of feasibility study and work with people to say this is what it would actually look like, that's why we need this early funding. I think we recognise that this committee is not in a position to agree it. All we're doing is recommending that Policy and Resources consider it as a very serious bid.
Thank you. And I think with that reassurance from both Mr Biggar and the Director, we'll move to the recommendations. Certainly it has been very welcomed and long overdue. And I would just endorse the recommendations to recommend the Policy and Resources Committee a bid for the Corporate Change Fund for 315,000. And members agreed to do that. Thank you very much. Okay, if members had their A3s handed out now, good, excellent. So we'll move to item 9 on the agenda, Dumfries Learning Town Consultation Progress Report. Obviously, members have asked to be kept updated of the ongoing consultation which started mid-to-end of last year and will continue on through this year. And the report in front of us is just addressing where we're at, where we're going, and any points that have been picked up by both the Directorate and teachers, staff, pupils, parents, etc. out there in the community. Director's here to answer any questions on the report. Is there anything you would wish to add at this stage?
The only thing I would add is in relation to the paper you're looking at just now, because as Councillor McKee said, it would have been very difficult to read it beforehand. Quite simply, that paper there is simply to illustrate the range of communication strategies that are put in place and the fact that those have been planned out over a period. It doesn't change any of the major timelines that we'd already agreed at this committee. And in fact, this is an additional report today, really just to reassure members and bring them up to date with the range of items that are around. You know, I won't say any more than that just now, but I can give more detail about forthcoming meetings, etc., and meetings that are going on, if members so wish.
Thank you very much. Councillor Marshall?
Yeah, I think this is kind of the overview, but we also need to see as well, because I think we have identified maybe where there's some potential gaps with regards to stakeholder groups. So we probably need to see a full list and an updated list of the stakeholder groups that takes into recognition all area committees across Dumfries and Galloway, etc.
Okay, fair enough. The one item that has been developed and finished only yesterday, in fact, is an updated version of the regular letter, e-letter that goes out. And that e-letter has now been widened to go out to every school community in Dumfries and Galloway, for example. We've tried to widen it to take into account various subscribers and everybody that we could think of that would be interested. But if there are gaps, let us know. And perhaps, since it goes to, I believe, all councillors at the moment, I suppose there's a view among officers that kind of brings in area committees. However, if you feel something more specific can be done about updating the information, we'd be really happy to do so. We've spent an awful lot of time and capacity trying to get this to a stage where really good mechanisms for communicating updates. And if there are any gaps you feel we could address, we will do. I suppose to know what those gaps are, you need to know who we're sending them out to. So we'll have a wee, maybe send out to councillors the full list of where these letters are going.
I've certainly found the e-newsletter very helpful as we've been going along, and it is developing as we're going along. And again, access through the Dumfries Learning Town webpage, which took a while to get up and running. Councillor Nicholson, did you shake your head there when he said e-newsletters were going out to all members? Because I'd just like clarity. No, that was on another matter. That's fine. So they are absolutely going out to all members. Councillor Lever.
Yes, he's a naturally negative person. Yeah, I've been to a number of the consultations to date. And I must admit, I was disappointed by the number of people who attended in the audience, and also those who did attend expressed their disappointment to me that a number of the lack of councillors who were actually attending the meetings themselves. I mean, you know, we push for this to be sort of an open audience of councillors going along with the listening brief to find out what's actually being said. And I must admit, a lot of councillors from the Education Committee, I don't think have been to any of these meetings. And it was very instructive in terms of the presentation and the feedback as well. One of the concerns which was raised with me was a lot of parents didn't know these were actually going on because they hadn't had letters delivered to them directly. So I think an email went out yesterday saying that letters will go out directly to parents. So I think that will be an improvement. Now, hopefully that will encourage people to turn out, because it is a very, very major stage we're at in terms of developing the Learning Town options. But also people are concerned that option 3 is being pushed very much against option 1, and it's a done deal to a large extent. I mean, just looking at page 71 in the report, option 1, keep current provision of 4 existing secondary schools exactly as they are. Well, that's not true, because what we're going to do is we're actually going to renovate the schools. So the schools are going to be where they are, but they're going to be different from what they are at the moment. It's not status quo as was originally stated. It's going to be, if we go down that option, it's going to be renovated schools in the existing position. So I do think we need to develop option 1 much more than we have done to date. In terms of future consultation, I do think we need to actually have a list of where the meetings are going to be held, etc. I know it's an ongoing development. And people are also concerned. I was at a community council the other night and this came up, and people are also concerned about the revenue figures for this. Can we afford, if we go down the super school option or the higher school option, can we actually afford it in terms of the restricted budgets we're working on at the moment? So people just saying, well, does this mean that one of the current secondary schools are all being told to be kept open because we have so much overcapacity? Will we end up closing one of those when we find, in terms of the revenue figures, that we can't afford to fund an additional school? So I think we really need to look at that sort of aspect as well, because people aren't happy about the fact that there's no revenue figures in the current consultation.
Chair, thanks. Thanks, Councillor. I can answer all 3 of those, and very much helps that because of the feedback we get, we're able to amend and improve things. First of all, the letter that's going out will be pre-printed and given. We will pre-print enough for every single pupil in Dumfries Borough. The issue the last time was we sent a letter to primary heads and probably put too much on their shoulders to expect that they would make sure every single person got that. So these will go out to every single pupil. On that letter, it gives the dates and places of a very intense passage of additional engagement in the second 2 weeks in April. We get 10 meetings in April. We're leaving it till then for the next phase of intense engagement, because we're trying to get the working groups to develop more details so that we're going out with more information. So there's a lot more information in there for parents. It's very detailed. It tells them where all the meetings are. We'll copy that to yourselves. And I think that's an improvement of what we did the last time, which we recognised. The second thing is, you're absolutely right. I just didn't spot the as they are in this paper. We've changed that now. You'll find on the website, and everything that you look at that we've now updated, it doesn't say exactly as they are, because it was never going to be exactly as they are. You're quite right. The third thing is that we are really heavily looking at option 1 and 2, and 3 to an extent. Option 1 and 2 are probably getting the most attention. Option 1, if you have a look in this paper at the item which talks about sorry. Yeah, if you look at the 3.2.5, when we talk about the Dumfries Learning Town project team, that's looking very much at what the updating would look like, and updating the assessment investment in each of the needs of the 4 Dumfries secondary schools would be, whichever way round that would be. So we expect to see quite a lot of detail around option 1 and option 2 there. The learning and teaching groups are very much looking really carefully at what proposals might look like around option 1, 2 and 3. And what's terrific, I think, is I know, for example, I mean, the unions have been heavily involved now in helping us with strategic direction, and I know that the unions separately are looking at, if option 1 was to come to pass, what would that look like? And the sort of debate that they're having would certainly be that we need a change from what we've currently got in terms of how we link up 4th, 5th and 6th year outside partners. So all of that is very, very healthy debate, I think. But I think you're absolutely right. I don't want to come here to you in May with a paper with a recommendation or otherwise if we have another set of consultation events where we just feel that that parents out there don't know about this. So we'll do everything we possibly can to bring people into events, but also because the newsletter is significantly updated and improved, it's easier to get that to individuals as well. So I take every point that you made.
Thank you. Follow up, Councillor Lever.
Well, just in respect to, I did mean option 2 rather than option 3. I got confused. But in terms of local resources, I mean, that was the original plan, but I think since then it's been identified that Dumfries Academy might actually qualify for Scottish Government funding in terms of the refurbishment of that. So I think that actually throws around about £5 million into or potentially throws £5 million of central government funding into the pot for option 1. So I do think that needs to be brought into it as well.
Again, to pick up on that, and actually to pick up on another point that I missed earlier, the revenue which you mentioned earlier, the outline business cases that need to be developed around option 1, 2 or 3 need to consider staffing models and absolutely nail the costs of the staffing models and running costs of the establishments. So we can't afford to put to you any recommendation or even options that don't have enough detail that let you know whether the revenue costs are achievable or not. However, what I would also say is I would anticipate in any paper that comes in May that around option 1, if we were to go down the route of option 1, part of that would be to go back and explore with the government whether it's at all possible to re-bid to see whether we could get the 4 or 5 million that we might have got for Dumfries Academy, so that rather than handing back 17 million, I'm going to say we'd hand back 12, rather than handing back the full amount, we could still bid for £5 million. So that would certainly be part of option 1. We've no guarantee that we would get that, but it would certainly be a feasible bid.
Thank you for that. I have Councillor McKee and then Councillor Nicholson. If Councillor McKee's happy to do so.
Yeah, just a question, a query on that. You know, £5 million for the academy and that. You know, why was there a proactive, bid for the super school and not a proactive bid beforehand? You know, so you have actually had that information, so you actually had that, so it was dynamic. You know, it wasn't just something that thought of after and then we'll just do that if this doesn't work.
I think I've covered that on a number of occasions. At the time that we put the bid in, there was the option of bidding for 30 million or 5 million. We didn't even consider the 5 million, I have to say, because we thought we were putting a bid in to follow Education Committee's agenda, which was to find a solution, and indeed the corporate agenda, to try and find a solution which benefited every child in the council, right?
But option 1, that would have benefited as well. You know, it benefited his child because less money was spent on academy and you know, they would get the money for that then. So it doesn't seem like fair.
I'm not suggesting we did the right thing. What I'm trying to say is that was the reason we thought we were doing the right thing to bid for 30 million. We thought it could benefit everybody, whether it was a maximum bid of 5 million for the academy that we hadn't really considered. And probably isn't all that likely to succeed, but it is possible, and that's why we've been really transparent about saying that you could go back and look at that. So we may not have done the right thing, thought we were doing the right thing.
Thank you for that. Councillor Nicholson, did you have another point before I bring Councillor McKee in? Councillor McKee.
Aye, thanks, Chair. Could you just clarify, under 3.2.4 engagement timeline, you've got parent council meetings, Nithsdale, February, as part of the cluster working review dates. Could you tell us if they're going to be held? And I've got a list of calendar of events. I got it off the website this morning. I'm kind of disappointed to see that Lorrynow and Lochside schools are not included in the consultation process. Is there any chance that they could be fitted in? Because both schools have quite a large intake of pupils. You've got Lincluden, which is great, but could they look at Lochside and Lorrynow, please?
I think, Councillor, it's purely capacity. We felt in that fortnight that, I mean, the issue is that the working groups are working an awful lot of the detail, and therefore there's a relatively short gap that we'd really like to be quite intensive about getting as much information out as we possibly can. Partly because of that, we decided to really home in on 10 events, publicise them really heavily. They're all around Dumfries, and there are certainly, there's one including, there's also one in Maxwellton High School, that one's for staff, right enough. But I think the capacity and the time scale to get into every school wasn't one that we thought was reasonable, to be honest. I've just got to be honest about that. We think this gives every opportunity, if it's properly publicised, which we'll do this time, for people to come along and hear what it's all about and express their views. However, in addition to that, because we've got cluster working review meetings that are in February, we're trying to find every opportunity. So because those were already scheduled, we'll also go along when we've got parents there from Dumfries to hear about the cluster working review and give them a chance to ask. So we're really trying to do everything we possibly can with the people that we've got and the time scale available.
Based on what you said there, Marks High's down as staff only. Are you going to open it up to the public, or are you just going to keep it staff only?
Right, sorry, that is a staff only one, that one. My apologies.
Thank you for that. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you. What I've got to say is, you know, I've been at most of these consultation meetings. I think I missed one of them, and you know, with the parents, with teachers, and everybody else. And I've got the Christmas ones prior to Christmas. They were poorly attended, and I think the reasons been given, you know, because only certain parents were invited to that, and it didn't bode well for the whole, you know, communication issue, the whole consultation issue, and it, quite frankly, it's a bit of shambles. You know, some parents didn't even know about it, even those in the target list didn't get notice about it, and I've got to ask why the letters weren't sent, you know, to that. The meetings themselves, you know, the meeting discussion with parents was very good, I think, but the meetings, the information given by officers was inaccurate on a lot of occasions, and some of the other officers that, you know, we spoke to actually picked that up and they then changed that. But a lot of people, parents that I spoke to, found it more of a sales pitch rather than, you know, a listening exercise to parents. So I hope we learn from that, and I hope, you know, we go forward on a more positive note, because, you know, I had to agree with the people that I was speaking to, and as I said, I was at Labour councillors, but every meeting, and some guys are other, but that brings me on to, you know, it's quite unfortunate that the Tory and SNP coalition were not in any of these parent meetings, and I think, you know, if we're serious about taking it forward and not looking as if we've got a closed mind on things, I think it's important that, you know, other councillors listen apart from the Labour councillors.
If I could pick up on those, I've already explained about the letter, and I think you're quite right. it wasn't a lack of intent. We did ask every primary head to give these out to all the kids. Probably put too much on their back. We should have done it, right? Which, yeah.
Sorry, just I forgot one thing. It was brought up about the wider consultation. I think that is important as well. It's not just the areas in Dumfries; it's other areas as well. Even taking the Catholic provision. There's Catholic provision in Dumfries, but it's for other areas of the town. It's Annan, Lockerbie, wherever it is. So it won't have an impact. It won't have an effect on different areas apart from the Dumfries area. So I think that type of wider consultation, and it's not just to pupils that are going to be affected by this. It's to up and coming, it's people that have a vested interest, a stake in it in the future.
Again, Councillor, take that on board completely. And as I was explaining earlier, we've now widened the newsletter to go right across Dumfries and Galloway. I also know from first hand that the Catholic Church is consulting with its parishioners right across the area too. The other issue that you highlighted, the one about some officers gave some inaccurate versions, that was the conundrum was that I was trying to partly take on board the wishes of some members, and it wasn't always me that stood up and gave all the information, and therefore, although there are a number of us who've got quite a wide knowledge, sometimes it was people were in a slightly difficult position where they were standing trying to give the broadest information, which includes things that come out of this committee, because most of our councillors, teachers don't come out of this committee.
Just to follow up on that, I don't think it's the individuals, on purpose were given accurate information. I think the information that they got was inaccurate, and I actually heard the director giving inaccurate information as well. But so it's not just because he wasn't there.
Well, even though I don't know what that was, I'll apologise anyway. And the last point, sorry, I've lost it now. There was a final point you'd made, Councillor, that I thought it could be helpful with. Broader consultation we've covered. I think there was a third point initially that you'd mentioned. Aye, so we're doing that now.
Thank you very much for that. I think with that, we'll move to the recommendations. I think as with any consultation process, it needs to evolve, and we need to be able to bring in new stakeholders along the way and allow options to grow and develop and make sure that everybody is informed as best as is humanly possible. Members have asked that a list of stakeholders be that are currently receiving the email or the newsletter and the consultation list be emailed out. Would that be okay to do that via email, just that you have a full list of who's currently being sort of consulted as stakeholders? Yep. And with that, we'll move to the recommendations. Are members happy to note at 2.1 the progress with the consultation highlighted in 3.1 and Parents' Information Document Appendix 1? Councillor Nicholson?
Chair, yes. I think what should be paramount in all this is all the comments that are taken on board and included in that. So it's not just noting the consultation process and that, it's noting how we can learn from the consultation process and make it more dynamic.
Yep, absolutely. Claire's keeping, I would hope, a good accurate scribe of the issues that have been raised by members, and we'll pick those out and make sure that through the director that they are added to the consultation. So with that, happy to agree 2.1 and 2.2 and 2.3. Councillor Nicholson?
Again, note the refinements in the timeline for consultation in phase. Yeah, but so we've also got to include the wider consultation as well.
Thank you very much for that. Members, I have no further items of business, and I'd just like to thank you for your contribution today. I think there will be lunch, and hopefully, if you have planning, housing and the environment, you'll get a chance for a sandwich before then. But thank you very much for your contribution.